Okay. All right. So for those of you that are listening to the recording, I was just suggesting that my initial plan was to do, focus on 1 and 2, and then in the last session, throw in a few interesting verses from 4. But I've been getting a lot of emails saying that, people they never get to study 3 or 4. I don't think it's more advanced or anything like that. It isn't. Our business is Kriya Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga, and that will be our business for a few lifetimes. So let's not imagine that we are somehow advanced in some sort of way, that we need something more. We don't need anything more. We need to follow the yamas and niyamas. That's what we need to do. But nonetheless, we do have intellects, and it's okay. It's perfectly okay to absorb the intellects in jnana. So I was thinking, instead of just throwing out a few verses from 3 and 4, we will spend this 6 or 7 sessions as promoted, but we'll just do padas 1 and 2. Even then, we won't be able to fit them all in, and then we'll have a totally separate svadhyaya. We'll take a break, and maybe in the spring, we'll just have a new 6 or 7 series svadhyaya only on padas 3 and 4. Now, since that's different from what I kind of pitch this svadhyaya as being, if anybody has any objections, you can email me. Okay? But if you're in agreement, and I would hope you are, because then you get the chance to do a 12 series at least. Even then, we won't cover every single verse. Then that's fine. You can email me if you're in agreement, but I don't want a million emails. Oh, it's okay. You can send a million emails. Okay, so that's the plan. Right, now, let's kick off. That's my suggestion, rather. And we will start with our invocation.
By the way, these are 7 sessions.
7 sessions. We'll just stick to 1 and 2. And then we'll do another whatever session, however many we need to cover the 3 and 4 at a separate time, 2 months down the road. We'll take a break. Because if something is too regular and too available, the mind sort of just, kind of like takes it for granted. So we should, we won't do these too often, so that, that it's something a little bit special for me as well. Akanda mandalakaram yena vyaptam characharam tat padam darshitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine. Akanda Mandalakaram Yena Vyaptam Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu, Dinabandhu, Jagatpate, Gopesha, Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta, Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe, Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Hare Priya. Those of us in the Vrindavan tradition, we take shelter at the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. If we get her blessings, then she controls Krishna. So, and she's very sweet and very kind and very loving. Apavitra pavitro va, sarvavastha gatopi va, ya smaret pundarikaksham, sa bhayabhyantara shuchihi. Okay, my friends. Verse 5. Okay, so we know that that yoga, that that Atta Yoga Anushasanam. We're now going to study yoga. Now we have the human form. Now we've done all our jnana. We've studied. We have a deep level of conviction that our innermost selves are immortal. They survive death. They are not this body. Any spiritual tradition has told it, all the spiritual traditions of the world have told us that. Patanjali and yoga goes a step further, and they tell us not only are you not the body, but you're not the mind. Now, that not every tradition took that step. And Patanjali saying, okay, is that it? We, in Hindu Phil, the other ruckus, we're teaching Hindu Phil, I have 100 students in the class, and I kind of like get on their case. I don't get on their case, but I like to, I might be the only person in their life that who knows, this is our job is to plant seeds. We don't know what sprouts, what doesn't sprout. We don't know where anyone is coming from, where they're going. So we have a moment in time, and they're in the classroom, and so I say to them, how many of you believe in that you survive death? And 95% of the class put their hand up. And I say, well, think it through. Don't just put your hand up. What does that mean? What is it that survives death? What is that thing? And where's it going? Think it through. Don't just have a vague belief. I get on their case, but they love it. All right. So Patanjali is saying, don't just be pathetically vague. If there is such a thing as a drashtu in verse 3, a seer, then here's the process. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. If you still that mind, then you can have an experience of the seer in its own nature, not just a vague belief that you kind of cling on to uselessly, because it doesn't really affect your life for most people. Most people do believe in some kind of eternal something, but how many actually really spend serious time thinking about it? What to speak of considering whether there might be some method that might even lead to it in this body while we're still alive? Is there, Patanjali, that's the claim he's making. That's what he's stating here. He's saying, look, here's a process by which you can experience that which you believe in, that which you've studied, that's which you've heard about from the rishis, from the Upanishads, from the sages. You've heard about it. Do you just want to believe it, or do you want to know it? Okay. So the seer. So we have the chitta vritti nirodha, and I have to mute everybody periodically. So it seems. If you come in, well, okay. All right. So let's move on. So the process then is to experience that thing. The process is chitta vritti nirodha. Now there are 5 vrittis. Vrittayaha. This is the plural of vritti. So vrittayaha is the plural of vritti. It's just Sanskrit grammar. Panchataya, taya. There are 5 types of pancha. This is Indo-European cognate with penta, like pentagon or Pentateuch. 5. Okay. So pancha penta. So the vrittis are 5 types, and they're klishta or aklishta. We should know by now, all of us should know that an in front of a noun negates the noun. So there are 5 klishta. There are 5 kinds of klishta vrittis, and the same 5 vrittis there are a secondary version, not in the sense of lesser, but there's 2 categories of vrittis, and of these 5 vrittis. So there's category A, klishta, 5 vrittis, they're klishta, and category B, aklishta, 5 vrittis. That makes a total of 10 vrittis, if you want to think about it that way, okay? Now, and I don't think we pay enough attention to this. And to be honest, I don't think the commentators actually, it's been many years since I did this, so I want to say that even the commentators don't make a big deal about, draw the conclusion that we connect this to, why is that doing that? Okay, there we are. Right. What are the klishta and what are the aklishta, my friends? Let's go down to chapter 2. What are the kleshas? Right. So the klishta vrittis come from the kleshas. and the aklishta vritti come from the akleshas, or the opposite of the kleshas. Okay, so hopefully that's good. So what are the kleshas? So the klishta vrittis, see, you see the resemblance of the word klishta, klesha. Klesha is the noun form. Klishta is the past passive participle form of the Sanskrit root klish. Klish means to afflict, to trouble, to harass. So, I mean, it could be used for anything. It could be used for warriors on a battlefield, harassing each other. So it's just a Sanskrit noun. But in yoga, all these, yoga language takes a certain connotation. The kleshas are avidya, ignorance of the self. Asmita, ego, meaning I think I'm this particular body and this particular mind. It's an extension of ignorance. When the mind is not understanding that that consciousness is a higher entity pervading it, and the mind considers itself to be the self, and the body that it's in to be the self, that is asmita. Asmi means I am. So the minute you say so I am, the minute you say anything after that, except one thing, which we'll get to in a minute, but the minute you say I am English, I'm Italian, I am Hindu, I am Christian, I am anything, that statement is coming from a place of asmita, right? So one thinks one's body mind. When one thinks one is this body mind, then certain things feel good to this body mind, and they're called, and therefore they're ragas. Certain experiences, we experience certain things, either sensual things through the body, or emotional, intellectual things through the mind. Those that are pleasant leave a memory, and that memory is a pleasant memory. And so therefore it can arise on another occasion as a desire to repeat. Surely we like to repeat things. We seek things that are pleasurable. Well, how do we know something's pleasurable? Memory. Unless it's a brand new thing, in which case, well, we immediately prejudge brand new things, by the way. We immediately throw existing samskaras at it. So we start off with a little bit of in some cases, a strong kind of precondition, pre-evaluation, prejudgment, but that's a story for later on. So ragas, desires, are those things which felt good to the body mind, and those experiences are recorded and they surface on other occasions and put pressure on the mind to reindulge in them. And then the opposite is true of the dveshas, things which were unpleasant to our body mind. Things which are unpleasant to body mind, we are recorded in exactly the same way. And when we encounter them, we try to avoid them. And abhinivesha is the clinging to life, which is fear of death. As long as we're in avidya, all of these are built on avidya. He's going to say that. We're jumping the gun. We have to come down here to understand what the klishta and the aklishta vrittis are. The klishta vrittis in verse 1.5 are coming out of these 5 kleshas. Now, what are the akleshas then? Aklishta vrittis, well, they're the opposite, my friends. What is the opposite of avidya? Vidya, also known as jnana, also known as viveka, the knowledge, I am not this body mind. That's vidya. So those are aklishta vrittis. They're good vrittis. We have to have them. They're jnana yoga vrittis. We have to start off with those in order to even for the practice of yoga to even make sense. For us to even for the proposal that yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, and that the result of that tada will be drashtu swarupe vasthanam. The only way that's even going to make any kind of sense at all is if we have vidya, we have knowledge that there is an Atman. And where does that come from? It comes from the study of the sacred texts. It comes from the words of the great rishis. So that's so that's the opposite of avidya is vidya. Later on, Patanjali is going to call it viveka. So viveka, vidya, jnana, these are all more or less synonyms. So what's the opposite of asmita? Brahmasmi from the Upanishads. I am Brahman. This is the aklishta asmi. Brahmasmi, tattvam asi, and so are you. so that's the correct asmi, the correct ego. There is a self. There is a real self and a not real self. The not real self, why is it not real? Because it's temporary. It doesn't have sat. Sat means continual existence. It's always in a state of being. Well, the body does not continually, even in this life, it has changed from baby to boy to toddler to young person to old person. So even in this life, the body doesn't have sat. Even in this life, the mind doesn't have sat because it's changed so many times. The mind, when our minds as babies and toddlers and young ladies and so forth, it changes all the time. So they do not have sat, but consciousness has sat. We were conscious when we were babies. We were conscious when we were toddlers. We were conscious when we're young. So consciousness has always been sat. Its objects have not. Therefore, what's the correct asmi, I am? The correct asmi is the sat asmi. And what's another word for that is Brahman, Atman. And so therefore, the Upanishads have this wonderful little Mahabhakya saying, Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. So the opposite of, so we're looking at Klishta, Aklishta. What's the Aklishta version of Asmita? Brahmasmi. Moving on to the third one. Raga is the Klesha. What's the Aklishta then? Raga for the Atman. Mumuksha, desire for the Atman. That's a good desire. And in bhakti, there's even a type of bhakti, my friends, called Raga Nuga. Have you read about the gopis? Madly in love with Krishna. So mad that when he leaves them, they think the trees they talk to the trees. They think the bees are messengers. And they start talking to the trees and they say that to the bees, oh, you bees, don't come near us. You've touched the lotus garland of Krishna. And he sent you as a messenger. We don't want to talk to Krishna. He abandoned us. The gopis are mad. And by the way, they don't think of Krishna as Bhagavan. They think of him as an ungrateful, of course, then of course he appears and then they fall in love. I mean, they're always their love is so intense that they are qualified to become jealous and angry. In these high states of love, they become angry at the beloved when he's not there. So this is raga. They have intense raga for Bhagavan. And that highest type of bhakti in the Krishna Vrindavan tradition is raga anuga. The very word is embedded in it. Raga nuga. So that's the opposite of the mundane raga, is raga for body mind. This is the mundane raga. So the aklishta is two. It's vairagya, to be without desire for body mind things. That's vai means without, and we're going to encounter vairagya today, my friends. It's coming up in the next few sutras. Vai means without. So vairagya is the opposite, the aklishta opposite of raga. But once we have vairagya, and for the material things, for the sensual things, for emotional things, for these temporary things, the asat things, the things that do not last. The wise seek the sat. The ignorant seek the asat. That's not my language. That's the language of the Upanishads. The wise seek the sat, right? Remember the Gita. Yehi samsparshaja boga dukkha yonaya ebate. These sense pleasures are the sources of frustration. Why? Adi antavanta kunteya, because they have a beginning and an end. They're asat. Adi anta. We had this verse last time. Nate shuramate buddha. The wise are not interested in that. They don't want the asat. They want the sat. Why are they going to settle for some asat when it doesn't last? So they want the sat. They want the eternal, even if it means working hard for several lifetimes, Krishna says. Aneka janma. So the opposite of raga is vairagya in terms of body, mind. And if you're a bhakta in the Vrindavan tradition, but you could also apply this term to Shiva or Devi, raganuga, you're madly in love with the beloved form of Bhagavan. That's got nothing to do with body, mind. It's aklishta. And the same with dvesha. And what is the opposite of abhinivesha? My friends, Patanjali says, even the wise, who's the wise? The one who they know about the Atman. So they're wise. They have wisdom. but they haven't experienced it. Till you've experienced it, there has to be fear of death. Because you haven't experienced the Atman, you haven't experienced anything other than body-mind. Even if your body-mind is in an amazing high state of wisdom, you still haven't experienced the Atman. So there's still going to be that little bit of Abhinivesha. Patanjali himself says it, as we'll see when we get to chapter 2. All right, so we clear. So there's kleshas, and the vrittis that come from the kleshas in chapter 1, verse 5 are called klishta vrittis. And the vrittis that are the opposite of those, the aklishta vrittis, are the opposite of the kleshas. And we just went through the opposite of avidya is vidya. The opposite of asmita is brahmasmi. The opposite of raga is vairagya. And at the same time, if you're a bhakta, raga for Bhagavan. And the opposite of abhinivesha, well, grammatically, I suppose you'd say unabhinivesha. It's a bit clumsy, but it would be not fear of death. And the only way you can actually not really, even the wise, Patanjali says, and the only way you can be not fearful of death is if you've actually perceived, okay, the Atman. So these are the 5 types of vrittis. Category A, klishta. Category B, aklishta. And they all have to be nirodhahad. Even the aklishta ones in Patanjali Yoga. This is where bhakti it takes a different direction. Bhakti is not interested in this. Bhakti says, no, we're not going to nirodha our vrittis about Bhagavan. You can keep your svarupa vastanam, says the bhaktas. Keep it. You want to be absorbed in your svarupa eternally? It's all yours. We don't want it. We want to be absorbed in thoughts of Bhagavan. That for us, the bliss of that is much greater than the bliss you're talking about, your Satchidananda bliss of the Atman. We want the bliss of Bhagavan. So this is one of the ways that it's not that the Bhakti denies this. Says, yeah, of course it is, you can have it. It's there. But we don't want it. So that's how the bhaktas take a different they take, that's where they say, okay, you yogis, you want to be absorbed in your own sarupa. We want to be absorbed in the rupa of Bhagavan, the beautiful form of Bhagavan. Right? Stuns all 3 worlds. You read the beginning of the 10th book, when Krishna enters the universe. All the constellations align in the most ecstatic, the most auspicious. The whole universe is worshiping, adoring, and offering whatever they can to Bhagavan. So if you're a star, what do you do? What can you do? What can you do? You can't sing, you're a star. You can't cook, you're a star. So then you align yourself in the best possible, most auspicious constellation known to the heavens. The oceans rumbled in the most pleasant baritone with the waves, and the clouds join in harmony. You have this cosmic harmony, the clouds rumbling, the sea rumbling, the birds and the bees buzzing. This is then the harmony of nature welcoming Bhagavan into the universe. So the whole nature is stunned. So that's because when Krishna, and when they see the form, the rupa, right? Patanjali wants the svarupa, the rupa of the Atman. The bhaktas want the rupa of Bhagavan. When Bhagavan appears in Vrindavan, he walks around. The trees horripilate, their leaves bristle with ecstasy, and they bend down to try and offer a fruit or a flower because they can't walk. How are they going to serve Bhagavan? What are they going to do? So they bend down, or they give him shade, and the bees buzz around, and all of the Yamuna River, the river stops flowing, stunned in ecstasy, stunned. We can't move. The waves can't move. So this is because of the rupa, the form of Krishna. So that's the opposite of so that's raga nuga right now. We took a bit of a detour. Right now, what are these? Okay, so the 5 vrittis. Okay, what are they? Pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra, smritayaha. Okay. The 5 vrittis that we have to nirodha, and remember, each of these can be klishta or aklishta. Each of them, keep that in mind the whole time. All of the next discussion on Vrittis. The 5 Vrittis can be Klishta or Aklishta. So these Vrittis are states of mind. The pramana is when the mind is right knowledge, but this has nothing to do with knowledge of the Atman. The pramana is not knowledge, it's not viveka, it's not vidya, it's not jnana of the Atman. Pramana is knowledge of the world out there. Knowing something. How do we know something? How do we know something? Just any mundane thing. How do we know it to be true? Patanjali is making a declaration that yoga is chittavritti nirodha, tada drashtu sarupe vastanam. Then the seer abides in its nature. How do we know it to be true? It's called epistemology in Western philosophy and religion. How do you know something to be true? Okay, what are the sources of right knowledge? That's the first. So when the mind is situated in correctly perceiving, there's a tree out in the garden. Yoga is a realist school. There's really a tree out there. It might be made up of subatomic particles, but but it is taking the form, that form right now. So this is not Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta would say that's false. Jagat Mithya, all forms are false. No, that's not yoga. It's really, Advaita Vedanta has really kind of permeated Western perspectives of yoga philosophy in an unbalanced way. Because in pre-modern, the many schools of thought, Advaita Vedanta being one very honorable and venerable one, but only one. And yoga is not Advaita Vedanta. So whereas Advaita Vedanta would say the world is a mirage, no, that's not yoga's position. That's not Sankhya's position. There's a real world out there. It may be temporary, but the forms are real. They're not superimposed in the language of Advaita Vedanta. Superimpose means when, like, for example, you superimpose something, like in the desert, you see a lake, you're superimposing a memory of a lake onto the sand. That's superimposition. In photography, you can superimpose, right? If you want to make a ghost in a room, you take a picture of a room and then a ghost, a separate picture of a ghost, and you superimpose them. So that's Advaita Vedanta's understanding of the world out there. It's really Brahman with forms and names superimposed. That's not yoga or Sankhya. So there is a world out there, and it can be known by pramana. We will discuss that in a minute. What are the sources of knowledge? Okay. Now, the opposite of that is wrong knowledge, viparyaya, right? If you can perceive the tree correctly, then there are instances when maybe you've had too much alcohol or any other kind of instance, you perceive something inaccurately. Then there is vikalpa, imagination, but not imagine. Vikalpa is metaphoric thinking, actually. So if I were to translate this again, I think I would qualify that term imagination and be a little bit more accurate. And we'll discuss why in a minute. And there's nidra, deep sleep. So that is a state of mind. Nothing to do with the Atman. The Atman doesn't go to sleep. It can't. It's sat. It can't. It's sat. It cannot change its inherent nature. Light is always light. You cover it, but the light doesn't get covered. So the Atman is always conscious. It doesn't become non-conscious. That would go against its fundamental nature. It would be destroyed, and you can't destroy the Atman. It's eternal. As Krishna says in the Gita right away, first teaching, can't be cut, can't be cut by weapons, can't be burnt, it's irreducible in the language of the philosophers. You can't reduce it into anything smaller. Okay, that's what sat means. It's always in a state of ising. And finally, memory. Okay, these are the 5 vrittis. And they all have to be Nirodha, and they can all be klishta or aklishta. Okay. What is right knowledge? Pramana. And this is, Indian philosophy, like, what is philosophy, right? What is philosophy? Well, Western philosophy probably would say, well, there's metaphysics, and then there's epistemology. These are all categories of philosophy, things that come under the rubric of philosophy, right? Metaphysics, what is out there, or ontology, you know, what is the world out there? What is its ultimate reality in nature? Epistemology, how do we know it? And then probably ethics might be a branch of philosophy. And so you have these various, in Indian philosophy, it's the same thing. You have, you know, tattva, metaphysics, tattva. What is the nature of that? Tat. What is the tattva? What's the nature of that? What's the that? Well, that, not this, me, the perceiver, that, everything I perceive, that's that. It's out there, outside of my head. So what's the nature of it? What's it made of? That's Sankhya and Vaisheshika, two of the schools. So pramana, all of the schools have to have a discussion of what pramana they accept. Okay? Now, but Patanjali doesn't discuss it. Why? Because Nyaya does. Patanjali's job is to teach us how to chitta vritti nirodha. So he's assuming that we've done some Nyaya. All right, so there's three ways of knowledge. Pratyaksha, sense perception. Anumana, inference. I've got logic, but technically it's an inference. And agama, verbal testimony. Three ways of knowledge, my friends. Okay? Right. Now, we are going to do this. Oops, can't do that. Cannot minimize. So I go to share screen, and then I go here. Right now, we're going to have a quick peek at Nyaya. Most of you didn't do Nyaya, but some of you did. It'll be a nice review. Okay, Nyaya accepts 4 sources of knowledge, the same 3 as yoga: perception, inference, right? In my text, I translated it as logic, but it's the same Sanskrit word, anumana. Forget about analogy, and testimony. So out of the 3 that yoga accepts, Nyaya accepts the same 3, but it will make a case for a 4th. That doesn't need to detain us. We're not interested, and it's not particularly convincing in my view. Okay, so let's see what they have to say about the 3 that yoga does accept, the 3 sources of knowledge, pramana, okay? And we'll go down. Right, perceptual knowledge, the first one, sense perception. How does it arise? What are the conditions for sense perception, right? Is everybody okay? Let me just take a quick peek. Is everyone okay? Will you see what we're doing? Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. What are the vrittis? 5. It can be klishta or aklishta. Fine. What are the 5 vrittis? The first one is right knowledge. And it's subdivided into 3. We're still on the first of the vrittis. The 3 things are subcategories of the first, right knowledge. How do we get right knowledge? Sense perception, inference or logic, but inference, and from words. Okay? Think about it. How do you know anything? Either you perceive it yourself, or you deduce it. You make an inference, like you hear a rumbling in the road outside and you infer a big truck is going by. You haven't seen it. Or somebody tells you, someone says, oh, you know, something's happening in the park, or words, or you go to college and you get knowledge from words from the professors, okay? So, but now we're going to look at this a little bit. Is everybody following? Are you okay? Everybody give me a thumbs up there, all of you divine beings up in the little boxes. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay, we'll keep going. And is everybody okay with the idea of just doing, having 2 sessions, you know, 6 or 7 just on chapter 1 and 2, and then having a completely different series? If you don't want to do it that way, send me an email, because I did, you know, thumbs up, everyone. I'm going to scroll up the top there. Yes, 2 different series, all right? The second will be 3 and 4, big time. Get into cities, mystic powers, cool stuff, walk on water, wine into water, water into wine, all of that good stuff, except that the yogis didn't drink wine. So it will be water into somaras, soma. Okay, so let's get back to our Nyaya, right? Well, why are we doing Nyaya? Why are we doing Nyaya? Because Patanjali just says that there are 3 ways of right knowledge, but he doesn't explain it. Why doesn't he explain it? Because Nyaya explained it for us. So we got to go look at Nyaya. That's why we're looking at Nyaya. Patanjali is going to presume that we did our Nyaya. So let's not tell him that we didn't, and let's cheat, and let's do it now. So here we have our Nyaya. What is sense perception? Right, perceptual knowledge. How does it arise? From a connection of a sense faculty and object. Right, your senses contact an object. Your eye sees the tree. Your ear hears the music. Right, number 1. So there's 4 conditions for this to be right knowledge. If any of these is not in place, you might get wrong knowledge, which is the second vritti. For it to be right knowledge, these 4 conditions have to be in place. Number 1, connection of a sense faculty and object. It's sense perception. Obviously, the sense has to contact an object. Number 2, does not depend on language. It doesn't matter whether you know the name of the tree. You might be in, another country and you don't know the name, but you still see the tree. You might be pre-verbal and you don't know what to make of it, but you see it. So it doesn't depend on language. Sense perception does not depend on language. Language is secondary. You then apply language, but sense perception is primary. Secondarily, you then decide, what are we going to call this thing? And you get around and you say, okay, lads, what should we call it? And someone says, let's call it Amagama. And somebody says, no, let's call it Abracadabra. And the big bloke with the club says, we're going to call it tree. And then they call it tree. Okay, so it doesn't depend on that. They all saw it. So it doesn't depend on language. Number 2, inerrant. Inerrant. It's always correct. There is, it's accurate. For it to be right perception. And it's definitive. There can be no doubt. Well, is it a tree? Is it a post? If you're not sure about it, then that comes under the category of doubt. Not necessarily error, but doubt. So it has to be definitive. You actually have to perceive it as a tree. So then you get knowledge of it. Let's say you didn't have this and you only had the other 3. You look at the tree. So your sense is connecting to the object. It doesn't depend on language. It doesn't waver, but it's not definitive, right? So then you get doubt instead of right knowledge. So you have to have all 4 conditions in place for it to be. Let's just have a little look. He goes this whole thing. Okay, that's sense perception. For it to be. Now, what's the second thing? In Patanjali, okay, so now we're looking at pramana. We're looking at the 5 vrittis. Pramana is right knowledge. The first is right knowledge consists of sense perception. Now, logic, inference. Okay, we can read Nyaya if we want to, but it's going to take a long time. I don't want to scroll through Nyaya. But inference is when you don't see the thing in question. You see what is called a linga, the sign of it. Have you heard of the Shiva linga? So a Shiva linga is the sign of Shiva. A linga is actually a genital. So the Shiva linga is the genital of Shiva. But when a baby is born and you want to identify the sex, you look at the linga. And in Sanskrit grammar, you have masculine nouns and feminine nouns, and they're called strilinga and pulinga. And then you have neuter nouns, napunsaka. We're neither of the two. Napunsaka. So you have neuter nouns. So for anyone that doesn't want to identify, these are grammatical terms, but it's kind of cool that you have this third category, which is not sort of male or female. It's napunsaka. It's neuter. It's neutral. And I think that's, that probably resonates a bit with our modern sensitivities. But anyway, so linga is the sign. Now, the sign of something else. So the genitalia are linga because they're the sign of a gender. I mean, at least that's how the ancient Indians would have thought about it. Nowadays, of course, these categories are all coming under. They're all being deconstructed. But anyway, So the classic example is smoke is the linger of a fire. So when you see the sign of the fire, so when you see the smoke, you don't see the fire, because if you saw the fire, that would come under the first means of right knowledge, which is sense perception. You see the fire, sense perception. Number one. Number two, you don't see the fire. What do you see? Smoke, the linger, the sign of the fire. You know, but you get right knowledge of a fire, but it's not as clear. It's not, you don't know how big it is, small it is, what kind of a fire. You know there's a fire. You have knowledge, but that knowledge is not as vivid and direct as the first. So everybody agrees that sense perception is the highest form of knowledge. You have direct experience. But inference is also a form of knowledge. And most of science is inference. You infer things without perceiving them, even the atom. You perceive atom or subatomic entities from their signs. Might be a trail through a vacuum chamber or something. Most is inference. Big Bang is an inference. Infer if a universe is evolving, it must come from a point, a 0 point. So science and philosophy are essentially Anumana enterprises, the second form of knowledge. It's called Anumana in Sanskrit, in the middle here. Break this long word into three. Sanskrit, you join words together. You can, not always, but certain words you can join. There's actually three words here. So pratyaksha, break. Anumana, break. Agama. Agama is verbal testimony, words.
Excuse me, Professor, we're still looking at Nyaya on your screen.
Oh, well, you're blessed. So let's get rid of it then. Bada boom. Can you see it now? Okay, so now I have to stop screen, and then I have to start screen. Is that Ellen?
Yeah, now we see you. Oh, now we see me.
Now we see you. Okay, so now we go to, back to that. Is that okay?
Yes.
Right then. Okay, so what I was saying is that this long word can be broken into three: pratyaksha, anumana, and agama. Not can be, has to be. There's three words in there. But because of Sanskrit, sandhi, because of, words can be strung together. So you have to know how to break them up. Right. So the second way of right knowledge is inference. But there are conditions. For it to be right knowledge, there can be no exceptions. It always has to be the case that wherever there is smoke, there is fire. It always has to be the case that if all men are mortal, Socrates is mortal. It always has to be the case that, well, the Greek syllogism doesn't quite fit the same way, but it always has to be the case. So if it isn't always the case, then it might be a probability, but it's not right knowledge. If it's mostly the case, like with the quantum theory and the collapse of the wave function, you can you can make equations for the probability. Well, these traditions would say that, well, that's probability. It's not right knowledge. You don't actually know. Okay. The third way of right knowledge is verbal testimony, words. And there has to be conditions. Again, Patanjali doesn't discuss this, Nyaya does. My friends, if you didn't do the Nyaya course, go online, go on my website, click on the Nyaya course, take the time, turn off the telly. That's not going to help you at the moment of death. Throw away rubbish literature. That's not going to help you at the moment of death. Take 2 hours, 6 sessions, and go through Nyaya. It's very interesting, very invigorating. Don't think it's dry cerebral stuff. It's all bolstering your practice. If you're going to do yoga, there has to be some kind of rational reason why we do it. We have to have rational reasons for our activities in the human form. Even animals are rational and have rational reasons for what they do. All right. So now, what does Nyaya have to say about verbal testimony? Truth conditions, right? So 4 conditions for sense perception. We just read them. Contact of sense, sense object. Doesn't depend on language. Inerrant, doesn't err. And definitive, no doubt. Right. Conditions for the next one. Inference. There has to be an invariable relationship between the sign, the sign and the thing it signifies. Inviolable, 100% of the time. Invariable, no, it doesn't vary. The smoke always, every time there is smoke anywhere in the universe, even if they land on planet X in some other solar system, and that smoke, if it's smoke, not mist, not fog, not some other thing that look, no. Smoke means, but the very word smoke in Sanskrit, dhuma, is that which comes from fire. The very word itself. So it has to be no exceptions. If there's even one exception, well, then there could be 2 or 10 or 1,000,000. So therefore you have probability, but not right knowledge. There's no, the right knowledge is always right. Right. And so the 4 conditions for sense perception. The condition for inference is there has to be the sign of something else. And that sign has to be 100% of the time. Whenever you see that sign, it's pointing to that other thing. Okay? Okay. The third condition for words is 2. 1, the uptavachana, that the person, 2 conditions. The person who is speaking the words has to have experienced that which he or she speaks about. Has to have experienced it. If they haven't experienced it, well, then how do you know it's right? And number 2, they have to have a desire to communicate. Because you might have experienced it and you have no desire to communicate. Well, then you're not going to provide verbal testimony. These are the 2 conditions. They each have a higher, a lokika and alokika. The 3 forms of knowledge can be applied to mundane things of this world, like mountains and trees and fire and smoke. And the same 3 can be applied to the Atman and Bhagavan. How so? Prachaksha, you can perceive the soul, but not with the senses though. What is the whole yoga about? Svarupe Vastanam. What happens? Then you have experience. So in other words, it's direct experience. Inference is indirect because it's mediated by a sign. When you infer fire from the smoke, it's indirect. And when you hear words about the fire, it's indirect. Somebody tells you there's a fire on the mountain. There's a fire on the mountain. There's 3 ways of knowing it. 1 is direct. You see it. The other 2 are indirect. The second is you see a sign of it, the smoke. And the third is you hear words about it from a reliable park ranger. That's secondary, mediated. Right. Apply that to higher pramana. So lokika means loka, this world. So there is pramana about things of this world, the loka, lokika, belonging to our mundane realm. And there's we know what means, alokika. There is knowledge of things which are not of this world, like Atman and Bhagavan. They can be known in the same 3 ways. You can perceive the Atman and you can perceive Bhagavan. There are plenty of stories of great bhaktas who have darshan of their beloved Bhagavan from the beginning of from the Upanishads and the Puranic literature and the epics, right into the medieval bhakti traditions, the Puranas, and right into the 16th century traditions. And I'm familiar with the Vrindavan ones, but you'll find plenty of accounts in the Shaiva and Shakta of visions of Devi and Shiva and Bhagavan and Krishna and Narayana. So perception. So that's perception, meaning it's not mediated, it's direct. And what is alokika? Inference. Well, you can infer that there must be a Bhagavan. That's what Nyaya does. They infer there must be an intelligent being behind the workings of the universe, right? Much as Richard Dawkins can't stand the idea We're reading Richard Dawkins this week in our Science and Religion. So we start off with the Purva Paksha, the opposing point of view, which is Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion. He's a very good writer. And but he's nasty. He's nasty, but he's clearly a very intelligent person. He's actually a good writer. He can be quite funny. But he just has this nasty little kind of snide, condescending. It's worse than that. It's actually, it's really, it's a little bit vicious in places. So he's like a missionary. He's like a kind of a anti-God missionary, but that's good. So you really get the sort of Purva Paksha. So we're starting with him, and he hates this idea that, intelligence, that why do you have to posit intelligence? What have you gained by positing? So anyway, so therefore this kind of an argument, do we have to assume there's intelligence behind the universe, or can we just say it's the nature of things themselves? Why do you have to introduce an intelligence? That kind of a discussion gets taken up by Nyaya again, because they're the logicians, and they will use Anumana to create, just wherever there is smoke, there is fire. Wherever there are compounds and products, there's always a producer in known experience, right? Because in inference, you're making an inference about something that is not within your known experience. Anyway, and so they do all of that work. So that would be higher pratyaksha. And they also make an inference. They also use inference to argue that there must be a soul, an eternal soul, and their opponents, the people they're taking on, the opponents in Sanskrit, Purva Paksha, the opposing point of view. Remember, the real philosophers, they don't just spout their thing, they're engaging other people's opinions, the ones that are most dominant, right? So Richard Dawkins is arguing against Christian theism, actually. He's completely Christian, his Purva Paksha. Be interesting to see what, if you study Vedanta, what he would have to say about that. But he would say the same thing. Why do you posit consciousness as it's some distinct kind of category? We haven't found its material origins yet, but we will. So it's a kind of faith that some sort of primordial chemical soup, somehow magically, some chemicals, just a one-off thing. Unlike natural selection, which is not not a one-off thing. He's a natural selectionist. That's his thing. He's an evolutionary biology. Sorry, it's fresh on my mind because I'm preparing for class. But he has nothing to say. It's only one little paragraph, and he runs away from it. Well, life must have originated in some, but we don't know how it did. But it must have done, because we're here to talk about it, the anthropic principle. It must have done in some little kind of chemical pond somewhere. Somehow life accidentally emerged, an accidental emergence from chemical, and then he runs away and talks about something else. Well, how the heck can consciousness arise from chemicals? If he could do that, how can one property arise from something with completely distinct? That's just magic. You can't, that's not science. So you have to sort of demonstrate that. If you wish for it not to be a belief, you have to demonstrate it. But nonetheless, so Nyaya will do inference to say, no, that's not good enough. To say that life just magically pops out of material entities. It's a completely different kind of quality. Consciousness is different from rough and smooth and other qualities like color and form and shape and touch. It's completely distinct, therefore it must reside in a different kind of substance. So they use reason and argument. So that's alokika, anumana. And what about alokika? Remember, not of this world, right? These three pramanas, the three pramanas, they are lokika, things of the world, and alokika. Well, we're looking at the alokika ones. First of all, you perceive the soul. That's the claim of yogis from the beginning of Indian literature to the present. Number two, you can infer there must be a soul. That's the job of the logicians. And number three, there are words. And where do the words come from? The Vedanta, the Upanishads, the sages who share their experiences, right? And what is the condition for words? Number one, the person who speaks them must have experienced it. And what are you going to do? Someone says, someone like Ramana Maharshi, or some great being, or, some great mystic, or the world is full of stories. And they make this claim. What are you going to say? No. Well, if you're Richard Dawkins, you know what you'd say? Oh, well, all these mystics, it's just brain states. They're just sort of deranged or abnormal brain states, like, epilepsy. I mean, that's the best he can do. If you're a materialist, what are you going to do to all the claims throughout history of these experience of pure consciousness What are you going to do? You're going to have to, you have no choice if you're a materialist. If you are committed to materialism, that is your, your metaphysics, that's your worldview, your faith, your belief system. It's a belief system because you haven't demonstrated that consciousness is material. So therefore you believe it to be so. And if that's your worldview, then what do you do when you read these stories of the great mystics where you have to say, well, they just all, deluded. He even calls the book the God delusion. So therefore, he could just as well have called it the soul delusion. So therefore, an experience of pure consciousness for him would be deluded. It would be actually, in fact, a kind of abnormal brain state. That's what you're going to have to say if you're a hardcore materialist. Okay? So, but the yoga traditions say, no, words, we have to accept, we have no right to just sort of dismiss this just because we haven't had in our little Ivy League, universities or whatever we are, just because we haven't, sitting there and we haven't had any mystical experiences, and therefore we want to, we want to make it fit into our paradigm of evolutionary biology. Then they would say, well, that's just a dogmatic assertion to deny it. So we have these accounts, and that's the higher words, okay? So the alokika, agama. Alokika means not of this world, words. So information coming not from this world or beyond this world. So either it comes from God, and that would be scripture, or it comes from, and by the way, Shankara says the Indian scriptures are authoritative because they are the words of the sages who have experienced the truth. So it's a little bit different from other scriptures in that way. Of course, there are words that come from God, like the Bhagavad Gita. If you accept Krishna as God, then so there is that category as well. But you notice the teachings of the Gita are just echoing the Upanishads. Krishna gives it a tweak and says, okay, you don't have to renounce the world, renounce the fruits. So he gives a little bit of a tweak on yoga. He says, look, there was another kind of yoga, it got lost, I'm reestablishing, but he's not giving anything new. If you notice, even when he gives karma yoga, he says, well, this is ancient. I taught it in the beginning. I was taught, and it was handed down. So Shankara's comment that the words of the scriptures are not sort of some God on high pronouncing things, but they are the actually records of experiences. And you could argue even the Gita, there are some texts which, obviously Shiva gives teachings and Krishna gives teachings and the Shveta, but a great deal of the what we call Shastra, sacred text, which we're talking about because words, they're alokika words, agama, right? A great deal of them are considered to be authoritative and authentic because they are the records of experiences. Okay? And we do the same thing. We haven't seen distant galaxies. We take the word of, astrophysicists who have seen it through Hubble bubble. In principle, you could go and get a PhD in physics, in astrophysics, and maybe, get access to the Hubble bubble telescope. Well, in principle, you could Chittavriti Nirodha and Svarupa Vastanam. How is it different? If you don't do it, you accept it on words. So whether it's looking at distant galaxies, what percentage of even astrophysicists, have access to, these advanced telescopes? I mean, in principle, they could, but they accept it on words. So likewise with yoga. In principle, we can sit down and Chittavriti Nirodha. And then we join the ranks of the sages. And if we have a desire to communicate it, that's the second characteristic of right knowledge. We give people right knowledge coming from our experience. Okay? So this is pramana, the first of the vrittis. Sense perception, inference, words. There is a lokika version of it, which are just mundane things of this world. You see things, you infer things, and you hear things. Our education system, our television, our sources of information, our media. And then there are the alokika variants of, not variants, alokika versions of them, or alokika kind of a different dimension, operating in a different, not in the body-mind world, but in the world of consciousness, we have alokika, perceptions, inferences, and words. Okay, my friends, do you see how we are, you see how we could spend like a year doing, you know, if we really wanted to unpack these sutras. And you know, I'm not in the business of hurrying, my friends. If you study this with a proper pundit in India, they forget about hurrying. Forget about hurrying. You could be a week on one sutra, and they'll pull each word apart, and they'll connect it to different texts, and say, okay, what does Nyaya say about this? What does Vedanta say? This is what Svadhyaya is. This is what Svadhyaya is in the modern, in the pre-modern world. So I'm not going to hurry. We'll just do what we're going to do, and we'll do it properly, and then we'll see what we want to do and how the time goes. All right, now, okay, so now that's the first vritti. Okay, now we viparyaya. Why are we talking about vrittis? Because chitta vritti nirodha is what yoga is. Let's keep our eye on the ball. False knowledge. What is viparaya? Mithya jnanam. Jnana is the same as vidya. Mithya, false. So, and he doesn't say it, but the commentators tell us false knowledge comes from the same three sources, but they're false. What does it mean to be false? Pratishtam, what's the basis of error? What is its pratishtam? What is it situated in? How is it based? Atad rupa. We know what rupa means, the nature of something, right? What is yoga? Chitta vritti nirodha tada drashtu svarupa, its own rupa, its own nature. So rupa means a form, a nature, an essence. It can mean the bodily form is a rupa, or it can mean the essence of something, like consciousness is the essence of beings. So what is its, so the atad rupa, the not that form of something. All right, tad means that, like tattva. Tad and T, it becomes a T because so tattva is the tva of tat, that, tad. Tad and tat, same thing. It depends on what the letter is following it. It becomes a T or a D. And means the not that. So there's a tree out my window. I look at it with my senses. My sense, so 4 conditions. Sense contacts the sense object. It's inerrant. You know, it's not depends on language, and it's definitive. Now, what if, you know, it's dark, I'm not wearing my spectacles, and and my sense contacts, so one condition is in place. My sense contacts the sense object, but it's not definitive, it's not inerrant. You know, it contacts it. Okay, forget about the right. I think it's a post. So I have a vritti of a post. But the post is the atadrupa, the not that form. Because the form of the tree, the tadrupa, is a tree, vriksha. So that's the tadrupa. But because of whatever conditions, and, you know, Nyaya talks about it. Well, it could be, you know, you have faulty senses. I have faulty senses. I wear spectacles. Right? So the contact of the sense with the sense object, that's fine. But what if you got faulty senses? Or any other condition? It's dark. Or, you know, Vyas even says, what if you're intoxicated and you see 2 moons? You'd think Vyas would have never drunk, but maybe he had a drink. How would he know that? Or he's hanging out with, but he hangs out with warriors a lot, Vyas, because he's always like teaching the warrior class, and the warriors are frequently drunk. So anyway, that's his example. 2 moons, right? There's only 1. So you're seeing 2. So that's error. So error is mithya jnanam. It's still a state of mind, though. Your mind says there is a post out there, or there's 2 moons up in the sky. That's real to you, but it's atadrupa pratishtam. It's not situated in the form of that thing, and therefore it's mithya jnanam. It's false knowledge. All good. Now, here's what you see here. I translated it properly. Metaphor. You see, I translated it properly there. Whereas here I translated it as imagination. I don't know why I did that. You'll have to forgive me. I think I was toying. I thought, you know what? Everybody translates it as imagination, but that's not what it is. And why do I say that? Because the commentators, whatever I did, I took from the commentators. I did not for 1 second change anything. I did not in any way imagine I had a better insight into the sutra than the commentators. My whole commentary was purely traditional. And a traditional commentator means that you're simply following the tradition by definition. The only thing I did was I would add some references to our modern day and age, and that's what the commentators are supposed to do, right? So maybe some metaphors and analogies that are more meaningful to us. But anyway, I think I thought, you know what? I don't know what I thought, but really it's metaphor. Now, what does that mean? The third vritti, it's called vikalpaha. It's vastu sunyo, it's deprived of an object. But it's shabda jnana anupati, like anushasanam. It follows the knowledge of words. What does that mean? The knowledge of words means conventional language. So a metaphor uses conventional language and conveys meaning, but it doesn't have an object. It's deprived of an object. Okay? So if I say something like, if I say, time flies. So that follows the usage of words. Nobody's going to, for a minute, pick that apart. But it doesn't have an object. There isn't a thing called time flapping around with little wings or big wings, right? But if I say time flies, is anybody going to say, what are you talking about? Where is it? I don't see anything in the sky flapping about. No one's going to say that. So therefore, but a lot of our speech is metaphor. You know, language is pervaded. There's another one right there. Language is permeated. Well, is there a thing called language with little holes in it that's permeated? So we don't even know how much metaphor we use. We're using it all the time. So if you're a philosopher, you have to account for everything. You have to have a philosophical category that you can fit everything into. Patanjali here is acting as a philosopher. This is not a mystical, this is not it's not like like the Upanishads or some text which is sort of mystical, poetic, and, like Rumi. I don't know about Rumi, but, there are mystics who write in a non-philosophical, non-systematic way, and they convey meaning. And they do that because they want to also convey that they're, oops, I got to throw a log. Well, give me a second, throw something on the fire. So, but Patanjali is very systematic here. He's being intellectual. This is an intellectual exposition. That's what a sutra is, right? So, therefore, if you're a philosopher, you say there's right perception. Okay, fine. And there's wrong perception. Fine. Right perception, sense and sense object. There's an object, and you perceive it correctly. Wrong perception, error. Number 2, vritti. There's an object, but you're perceiving it incorrectly. What about metaphor? It doesn't have an object, but it's not wrong. It's not error. Like saying the tree is a post is error, and everyone say, no, it's not. Look, it's a tree. Put your specs on. Oh, right? Both have, what is the common denominator of right knowledge and wrong knowledge? They are grounded in an object. Differences, one perceives it correctly, one doesn't. But metaphor is in between because it gives you right knowledge. Time flies is not wrong, but it's not based on an object. So if you're a philosopher, you can't fit it in the first vritti. You can't fit it in the second vritti. You're a philosopher because you can't run away from it, like Richard Dawkins does with The Origin of Consciousness. You can't run away from it. So you have to create a new category. That's how you create categories. And the ancient Indians agree that the most convincing system has the few, Occam's razor. The few categories you have, the better, more elegant a system you have. That assumption, which you could challenge, but that assumption, it's called lagutva in Sanskrit, and it's called Occam's razor in Western philosophy. And it's generally accepted. There are those obviously who are going to challenge, say, why should that be so? Why do you make that claim? You can't assert that. You can't prove that simpler things are more true. How do you prove that? But it is generally taken to be certainly a better argument. If you have if this, then that, it's better than saying, well, if this, and then if this, and then if this, and then if this as well, and then if this other thing, and then this. Well, clearly at a certain point you say, okay, well, we're getting it, it's a bit dodgy here. That's not such a good argument. Okay, so therefore, you have 5 vrittis. He's trimmed it down into as few categories as he can, these 5 vrittis, but he has to do something with metaphor. So he creates this 3rd category. Right. What's nidra? It's deep sleep, actually, not dream sleep. It's deep sleep. And it is a vritti, but very, very sluggish, very, very slow, tamasic, right? Because if it's non-REM. REM, if I got this right, REM is dream sleep. That's the next one coming up. But non-REM, correct me if I'm wrong, is deep sleep, not rapid eye movement, right? Yes, so deep sleep. So it's also vritti. Look at this, vritti. Notice he puts the word vritti in here. He doesn't put the word vritti in the other 2 because it's obvious they're vrittis. But deep sleep is not so obvious, because you might think in deep sleep there's no rapid eye movement, but you might think there's no vrittis either. So he makes, he does stick it in there because, one might have thought, well, tamas is absolute in deep sleep, and therefore there's no movement, there's no vrit, nothing's moving in the mind. But no, there is always movement. So he says it is a vritti, but its support, the alambana, you know what alambanas are, right? Don't you have alambanas in asana? Your supports in Iyengar yoga, aren't they all alambanas, your props? Don't they call them alambanas? Supports for the body. Or like I have a backbender upstairs, that's a alambana. So what's the alambana for the mind? What's the alambana for the vritti in deep sleep? It's bhava, the non-presence, bhava, the non-presence of pratyayas, of mental content. So it's still a vritti, but there's no mental content, which means the samskaras are not getting churned up, which is the case in REM. So when the samskaras get churned up, that would be dream sleep, and that comes into the 5th. Okay, everybody keeping their eye on the ball. 5 vrittis. The first is right knowledge, and it has 3 ways: sense perception, inference, and words. And those 3 ways can either be lokika, belonging to the world, things of the world, trees and mountains, or alokika, things not of the world, like souls and God. That's right knowledge. How do you get knowledge of things of the world or things not of the world? You get them from either direct experience, through the senses, if it's things of the world, or through yoga practice, if it's not of the world, through inference, and through words. You can hear about the fire on the mountain and mundane, or you can hear about the Atman alokika. That's the first vritti. The second is wrong knowledge, the same 3 ways. You can have a misperception. You can have bad inference. I didn't finish. You make a bad inference. You say something like, I don't know, if it's white, it must be a cloud. Well, that's a bad influence. Some white things, there's so many white things, they're not all clouds. That's not a very good example. But if you say, okay, wherever there's smoke, there is fire, that's a good inference. But wherever there is fire, actually, this is the example they give of a bad inference. Wherever there's fire, there's smoke. Well, no, that's not the case. Because you can have smokeless fires if the wood is very, very, very dry, they say. So you need wet wood to make smoke. And you can have bad words. Someone can lie, fake news, right? So you can have a viparyaya, good luck with the elections in November when it comes to, wrong information received from words, right? We better brace ourselves for that. Okay, let's keep it yogic right now. So, okay, so we got all of this, right? Now, memory is the asampramoshaha, the non-slipping away the not slipping away, vishaya, of a experience coming from the senses, that anubhuta that you have experienced, an anubhuta vishaya, a sense impression that has been experienced. When it doesn't slip away, that's memory. And that memory then you can expand it into dreams, fantasies, imagination. All of that is memory, nothing other than memory. So when okay, but let's look at the actual verse. So when they're not slipping away of a sense object. So I see the tree, I've experienced it, and then the next day I remember it. It hasn't slipped away. But the tree I saw when I was 3 on my tricycle, it slipped away, but it's there. It's there in my subconscious. And that's how you can get flashbacks. Something can trigger. You couldn't get a flashback unless it was there. And if something triggers a flashback, and if a very particular thing triggers a flashback, well, that means everything must be there. Why just that one thing? Unless you want to say that, something dramatic, but it's all there. And that's how you get deja vus. They might be from past life memories that slipped away, but suddenly pop into your consciousness. We had a discussion about deja vu. And in fact, someone sent me a link of a whole thing on YouTube about deja vu and trying to use it as an argument for past lives and reincarnation. And, taking it a serious argument. It wasn't like a flaky New Age argument. It was, it was scientists. There was a department in one university where they have a department on, examining reincarnation. I forget the name of the university. And it seems that the department's grown now. There's like 5 of them. One is looking at past life, collecting past life experiences. One is looking at deja vu experiences. And, there's 2 or 3 of them. Actually, John Cleese, the, Fawlty Towers, the comedian, was hosting it. So if you're interested, just, I don't know, I think maybe if you went onto YouTube, John Cleese panel on reincarnation. And it was I can't remember, it was Virginia University, and they had 4 faculty members, and each had their own forte and specialization on the matter of reincarnation. So, the other is near-death experiences, which doesn't necessarily point to reincarnation, but it does point to something distinct from the body. So they had these different categories that they are scientifically, they're documenting and collecting data. They're scientists trying to apply the scientific method and pushing it as far as they can, obviously, and trying to find empirical data, basically. Okay, so you might be interested in that. Okay, so now the memory then is the not slipping away of a sense object that has been experienced, all right? So in a mundane, I put my keys down and can't remember where I put them, and then it slips away, and then it not slips away, it comes back to mind. But your memories are the basis of your dreams, except in the dreams, they don't slip away, but you don't have control over them. So therefore, in dreams, the memories, they haven't slipped away because they're manifesting to consciousness, and that's how you're dreaming. So it comes under this category. They haven't slipped away, but you don't have control over them. There's nothing in the definition of memory saying you have to have control over them. He doesn't say that, Patanjali. He just says the not slipping away of a vishaya. So therefore, in dreams, they don't slip away, but they combine in weird and wonderful ways. When you fantasize, you create a fantasy that's not real, but the ingredients of the fantasy are real, because they come from samskaras, and samskara is a contact of a sense with a sense object. So you fantasize about, I don't know, sitting on the beach with your beloved, some beloved, but you have a memory of a beach that you have in your repertoire. Maybe you went to Hawaii, you went to Bahamas or something. So you just connect that, and then you have some memory of, you have some, you patch together some idyllic significant other, you're sitting there, and all of this is, the ingredients are real, but you just put them together. Unlike dream, where they are put together out of your control. In fantasy, you put them together within your control. You're sort of a master, you know, fantasy maker, fantasaire, if that's such a word. And you're making it, you know, you're putting it together, but the ingredients are all real, right? So all of this comes under Smriti, because Smriti is, if you're making a fantasy, then you remember the beach, you remember whatever the little bits and pieces of your fantasy are. They're all memory imprints, and those memory imprints were Vishaya Anubhuta. Look at the language. They were sense objects that had been experienced. In fantasy, you put them together with your own control. In dream, they merge together outside of your control, but they all follow this definition that they're not slipping away. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to put them together for your fantasy, and dream wouldn't be able to put them together in a weird and wonderful way, right? So that's the definition of memory. Now, okay, now we finish, my friends, with the 5 vrittis, which we have the Nirodha. All of them can be klishta or aklishta. What's aklishta? What would be an aklishta version of these 5? Well, right knowledge, aklishta, would be, you know, what we said, alokika. There would be right knowledge, that, you know, you seek the Atman, you seek Bhagavan, but you can also be a Jivan Mukta, and you are a Bodhisattva, and then you're in the world, and instead of sitting in the cave, you decide to go out down to the plains of India and teach anyone who is interested, the great beings, the great Parivrajakacharyas, the Parivrajakakas, the wanderers. They wander around and they knock on the door and they beg for milk, but they don't really want milk. They really give the householder an opportunity to invite them in and say, "Oh, Maharaj, aiye, padariye, betiye, doodh lijiye." Oh, and then they ask some nice questions. "Oh, Maharaj, apna ke bare mein kuch bataiye." And then, but if they don't, then immediately you go to the next house. This is the Parivrajaka, the wandering enlightened being, gives you a chance, appears there, knocks on the door. And, you know, if you're pious Hindu, but you're not too interested, you're pious, you give some milk, and they take, "Hey, Maharaj, jaye, jaye." You give some milk, and then that's it. Now, okay, that's fine. You get some good punya, you get some good karma, and that's good for you. But if you're interested, you know, in the Atman, and you see a holy person, then you ask them. You ask them questions, and if you ask questions, they'll stay. Don't try chit chat. Don't try chit chatting with the great beings, my friends. Oh, my teacher, we forget about, you know, he tried to chit chat. He wouldn't even answer. It would be rude. By our standards, it would be rude. I remember one time. Well, anyway, that's a story for another day. But it's not that he wasn't rude. He just wasn't willing to be asatyam, fake. So, why did we say all that? Because we were saying that, so what's the right? So therefore, the Bodhisattva is walking around in the world, but he still has to see things. He still has to see there's a door, and he's going to knock on it. So he has to have, his senses have to be working, and they have to contact the sense object. So he needs to have his pramanas in place. He might be blissed out in his Atman when he goes back to his cave, but when he's walking around, he has to have right knowledge, and there's no reason why he wouldn't have wrong knowledge. What if he's got bad eyesight? You're becoming a bodhisattva doesn't mean your eyesight becomes 20/20. Where does it say that in the Dharma Shastras? Where does it say that in Patanjali? Oh, if you reach near Bija Samadhi, your eyes suddenly become 20/20. It doesn't say that. So you could still have bad eyesight and be an enlightened being, and you could think that the tree is a post. Got nothing to do with your spiritual attainment. And you could still use metaphoric thinking. You could be in error. What if somebody gives you wrong information? Just because you're a bodhisattva doesn't mean you know. So therefore, all of these 5 vrittis can be klishta or aklishta. They're aklishta if they're engaged in the pursuit of Atman and Bhagavan. If the goal of a person's existence, to the extent that the goal of a person's existence is to seek the Bhagavan and the Atman, to that extent, those vrittis are aklishta. So you have to sleep. So you have to be in the vritti, the fourth vritti of nidra. Vidra jivan mukta or bodhisattva. You still have to sleep. Even if you sleep 1 hour. Let's go with the great beings. They sleep 1 hour. They drink 1 cup of milk every week. Whatever it is, you have to know it's milk and not something else. So your senses have to be working. You have to have right knowledge, and you can make a mistake. All right. So but to the extent that remember, what is our klishta? That you have vidya, that your brahmasmi, your asmita is brahmasmi, that your raga is for the atman and your vairagya. But still, so therefore there are klishta, but that doesn't mean that. But you still have the same 5 vrittis. They become aklishta to the extent that your mind is engaged and directed towards the pursuit of the truth that you seek. Okay, the Atman if you're a Jnani, and Bhagavan if you're a Bhakta. If you're a Bhakta, then the Atman plus Bhagavan. If you're a Jnani, then it's going to be just the Atman that you seek. All right, so we want to do Nirodha, my friends. What's Nirodha? Now we know what the vrittis are, right? Yoga is Chitta Vritti Nirodha. This whole section is a discussion of Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Right. What is nirud? To stop. Nirud, rud, to block. Right? To block. How do you Nirodha tan, them? Now we know what they are. How do we Nirodha them? Abhyasa Vairagya. Bhyam is the dual ending. The dual ending of the of masculine ending nouns. You put bhyam, sorry, not bhyam, bhyam. So abhyasa vairagya, bhyam. We nirodha them through doing 2 things: practice and vai, without. Ragya is the same as raga. It's a state of mind. The raga is the desire, and the state when the mind is in the state of raga, it is ragya. You put the ya in there. It's kind of the nature of something. So when something is of the nature of raga, it's ragyam. You could also call it rajas, just rajas. It all comes from the same root, raj. So raga is rajas. Rajas is desire. When the mind is in a state of rajas, it's in a state of desire and addicted to action. If you're a rajasic person, you can't sit still. You feel you have to be always doing something. My friends, this is a guna I know very intimately. My teaching is rajasic. Can you not tell? I'm not sitting there going, oh, lo, abhyasa vairagya, my sons and daughters, they're niro. I don't talk like that. I'm rajasic, right? So rajas is good, but rajas is energy. It depends on whether it's governed by tamas or sattva, my friends. Let's be clear about that. In and of itself. You think Guruji Iyengar wasn't rajasic? You think Krishnamacharya wasn't rajasic? You think Vivekananda wasn't rajasic? You think Shankaracharya, when he's wandering around India in his Digvijayas, wasn't rajasic? You think Ramanuja in his debates wasn't rajasic? You have to have rajas if you want to be a teacher, my friends. Maybe not as much as me, but okay. So vairagya. Okay, that is vai means without. It's a bit like is the opposite of something. So the abhyasa is the opposite of, no, that doesn't work for this word. But vidya, avidya. Vai is not so much the opposite as the absence of a thing. The absence of a thing doesn't necessarily imply its opposite. Whereas does imply the opposite of the noun it's tagged onto. So vidya, avidya implies vidya, right? So atheism implies theism. It's the same in English. But vai doesn't necessarily imply its opposite. It just means it's that thing, when you put vai onto a noun, it just means without that noun. It doesn't necessarily automatically mean that then corresponds to the anti-noun or the opposite of that noun. No, it's just an absence. So therefore, the absence of raga and practice. What does this mean? He's now going to define them one by one. So if you're looking at structure, my friends, the first 16 verses are an unpacking of the definition of yoga. First 16 verses. So he defines yoga as chittavritti nirodha. He tells us what happens. Then drashtu sarupe vastanam. Please at least memorize the first 3 verses. That's your homework, my friends. Memorize the first 4 sutras, or at least 2, 3, and 4 for your homework. Okay, that only the gods are watching, the devas. So I'm assigning you this as your homework for next week. There's just 12 words. How hard is that? 9 words. Okay, yoga's chittavritti nirodha. That's what yoga is. Tada, then, drashtuhu of the seer svarupe vastanam, the situatedness of the seer in his own nature. And verse 4, vritti sarupyam itaratra. Otherwise, consciousness is absorbed in the vrittis. You memorize those because you don't need to read anything else if you understand those. The rest is just an unpacking of that. The rest is just embellishment on those 3 sutras. That's it. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha, tada drashtu svarupe vastanam vritti sarupyam itaratra. Yoga. Okay, so memorize them. I'm going to test you. I'm going to go up there. I'm going to scroll through the heavenly realms. And what will I'll say, Natalie Lester. And then she'll have to unmute or not. She doesn't have to. And then I'll say, Jason Elliott. And then we'll test you. Okay, back to our Nirodha. What is it? Abhyasa Vairagya. Learn these words. They're in the Gita. Arjuna says to Krishna, right? This yoga of which you declare, right? Oh, Krishna, it's very difficult. How can I do it? Give me a second. Let's make a nice little connection with the Gita, my friends. Give me 1 minute, if you please. And how do I do this? OneDrive, the Gita, chapter 6. Here it is. Let's go down to the bottom of chapter 6. And Arjuna, like, he's getting all this heavy-duty jnana, and he's convinced about it. He says, yes, look. Here, Abhyasa Vairagya. Look, my friends. Here, can you see? Stop share. Okay, stop share. Now share. Now, tell me if you can see the Gita. Can you see it? Eleonora?
Yes, we see.
Yes, we
Evan,
can.
can you see it? Unmute, please.
Yes, we can.
I'm not getting any. Are you all there?
Yes.
Can
we
you
can.
hear it?
No, you can see it, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so
Yes, we
I beg your
can.
pardon. Okay, so Arjuna says, look at our Arjuna. He's us. It's me and you. He says, look, he says, Arjuna spoke, the yoga which is declared by you as evenness of mind. Okay, this is karma yoga, but it still requires the same abhyasa vairagya, right? He says, I do not perceive the steady continuance of this because of the mind's instability, right? If you were to frame that in a Patanjali language, I don't say I can nirodha the mind because the mind is fickle, right? Look over here. The mind indeed, right? You could apply this to yoga, is unstable. And that's Sanskrit for that. Chanchalam, chanchala. It's really chala, if you've been to India, right? Chalo bhai, let's go. Chal, to go, right? Chanchala means chal. It's a reduplicative intensitive. When you want to say something, an intensitive, but it reduplicates the verb. So it's going. Okay. Do we have that in English? Not really. We have walkie-talkie, but it's not quite the same thing. So the mind is chalam, always going, meaning it's moving, it's vrittying all the time. So manaha, the mind is chanchalam, pramati balavadradam, as if it's forced. It's strong, it's pramati, balavad, it's strong, the mind is strong, it doesn't want to nirodha, it's dridham, right? Tasyaham nigraham manye, I think, Krishna, controlling it, to try to control it, vayureva sudushkarab. It's as difficult as controlling the wind. You can't control the wind. Even your great big wind farms, they're not controlling it. They're just using it. How do you control the wind? So Arjuna, is a great question, right? You sit down and you try to meditate, fix your mind on your mantra, and it's like the wind. And Krishna says to Arjuna, without doubt, Arjuna, the mind is unsteady and difficult to restrain. But by practice, look, abhyasena and vairagena, two words. Abhyasena means by means of. Abhyasena, vairagyena, don't worry about the ena. That's the Sanskrit ending. Abhyasa, vairagya, griyate, it can be restrained. I hope you agree that that was a useful little detour. The same two words, my friends, Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so now I've lost my, oh no, I've lost my Patanjali. What? You know, I have this weird computer and things just shoot off the screen and I never know how to get them back. Does it happen to you? Like you open something else up and the original thing just flies off. And there must be a way of getting it back, but I've never figured it out. Okay, well, we have to go all the way back into my workshop, the Yoga Sutra file. Beg your pardon. We want to do a Nirodha before we end. That's our Dharma for today. So maybe spill over a few minutes. Okay, Yoga Sutra, is this the full text? Yes, full text. So when I click on it, it shoots back. It shoots back, but where was it? If anybody can help me with that, it drives me crazy. Like if
I can help you, Edwin.
You can. Okay,
Yes.
can you help me after the class?
Yes.
Okay. So when it shoots off, what's the immediate way of getting it back? I mean, if I just scroll like this, it doesn't come back. But let's do that after. Okay, thank you so much. Can you see this now?
Yes.
There's your abhyasa, there's your vairagya. Okay, everybody? Okay, Gita. Now, what is abhyasa? Right. So the next 5 verses are Nirodha. And 2 of them dedicated to abhyasa, 2 of them to vairagya. So Patanjali gives us little lists, and then he unpacks the lists, right? He says yoga chitta vritti nirodha, and then he gives us what the vrittis are. He gives us kriya yoga, klesha tanukarana, kriya yoga weakens the klesha, and then he gives us, and then he lists them, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, binivesha, and then he does them one by one. He gives us the yamas, gives us the list, ahimsa, satyam, brahma, and then he tells us one by one. So this is sutraic, systematic exposition. Right, so this is a little list. It's only got 2 things on it, but it's still a little list. So first of all, he just defines it. Nirodha is abhyasa vairagya, and now he's going to unpack both of those words. He starts with abhyasa, effort, 2 verses, 13 and 14, abhyasa, 15 and 16, vairagya. It's nice to see the structure of the sutra because it will help you know where to put a full stop and get up and make a cup of tea and come back and then another little section. Okay, so what is abhyasa? Right, this is nirodha means abhyasa. It also means vairagya, but right now we're looking at the abhyasa element in nirodha. What is the abhyasa element in nirodha? Yatnaha. It's the effort. Tatra stito, to keep the mind fixed there. Where's the there? Your object of meditation. This is not mindfulness. Let's be very, very clear. Mindfulness is a practice that emerges from probably Theravada Buddhism and becomes reactivated in I think Burma or somewhere in like the 18th century mindfulness. But it's a Buddhist practice, and it's I think a very valuable practice. But you don't stop the mind. It's not a Nirodha practice. You step back and witness it, and then when you do that, you realize what's nonsense, absolutely, nonsense mind it is. But no, this is a Nirodha. Now, if you want to Nirodha something, it's got to be situated on something else. If you want to, something has to be sitting on something more firm. So the mind has to be fixed on an object. And Patanjali will give a list of objects. For now, let's just say mantra. So he gives them Om. He says Om, right? So here you are, you're doing your Om. Om. Right. Now, tatra stito. I have to fix my mind, tatra, on that, Om. I'll do my Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama. Right, now my mind wants to wander up and start thinking about email. It wants to wander up and start thinking about something else. I have to bring it back. That's a yatna. That's an effort. That's an effort. Right, it may take me, I might be off my mantra for 2 minutes before I realize. And then a little voice says, come back. That's a Nirodha Samskara. The Nirodha Samskara, right? What's that voice saying? Come back. Right? One Samskara, email Samskara has captured my mind. And then another Samskara says, hey, this is not the time to think about email. Come back, get back to your mantra. Well, what's that little voice then? It's also Samskara. There's no magic. But a voice in the head is a thought. A thought in the head is a Samskara. What else is it? A Britti comes from a Samskara. Right? So therefore, that takes an effort. And sometimes you just don't want it. You say, no, I want to, no, I'm not, I want to stay with my rêverie, my lovely French word, rêverie. But anyway, that takes an effort, my friends. Yatna. You know the word prayatna from the asana verse. It's the same thing. So practice is the effort in situating it there. And there is your alambana for your mind, the support of your meditation. And that effort, my friends, that effort, if you want to call yourself a meditator, or you want to claim that label, oh, I meditate, I'm a meditator. Well, this is what it means to be a meditator. Tat satu dirgha kala, for a long time. For a long time. Let's go back to our Gita. What does a long time mean in the Gita? Oh God, I lost that one. No, I'm gonna just give me a minute, my friends. Bear with me. We're almost done. Oh no, I'm gonna lose it again, aren't I? Let's just bring that back. Okay, let me put that down. It's okay if I minimize it, then I don't lose it. But if I don't minimize it, is when I lose it. So thank you for helping me with that. Okay, but let's look at the Gita. What does a long time mean? Right? Does that mean, you know, a year? When I started my yogic path 45 years ago, I thought I'd be a bodhisattva by 30. And now I'm 66 and I'm still an idiot. And I realize a long time, now I see what Krishna says here. What does he say? He says, look, here, you might fall, you don't finish, you get a good birth in a family of yogis, so you can pick up where you left off because you didn't finish, right? He may be born if you don't finish in this life. So dirgha kala means many lives. It could be more than one, right? Then you get born in the family of wise yogins. Such a birth is very difficult to attain in the world. Why is it difficult to attain a birth in a family of yogins? How about because yogis are brahmachari? So it takes a very special yogi couple to decide they want to bring a soul into the world and raise the child as a yogi. But that's not the point. So then you take birth again. You didn't finish. What is that? We're looking at, what does a long time mean? Well, then you regain the knowledge derived from a former body. So whatever work you did in this life, it's not lost. Don't think it's lost, because sometimes people think, well, I like yoga and it's, you know, I relate to everything, but I'm never going to do it. Like exactly what Arjuna said. He's trying to wiggle out of it. He's saying, well, I can't do it. It looks like, you know, and Krishna says, no, it can be done, and do it. And if you don't finish, you lose nothing. You come back, take birth in a family of yogis. There he regains the knowledge derived from a former body, and he strives onward once more, right? But this is the verse we want to look at, 44. He's carried on even against his will, because if you do serious, heavy-duty practice in this life, you don't finish. Next life, you're going to be a pretty heavy-duty little boy in school or little girl with intense yogic dispositions. And even against your will, or in some cases, you get to be a kid, and then all of a sudden, those samskaras surge into your mind when you're a teenager or a young adult, they overwhelm your mind. Something triggers them, maybe, and you're carried on. And those some scars of 40, you did 45 intense years or whatever it was. That's not thrown away. And then they all come back, and you're in the whatever state of renunciation you attained, whatever state of vairagya, indifference to the world you attained, whatever wisdom you had about the temporary nature of things, it all comes flooding back, and you're carried on against your will. It becomes meaningless to try to find pleasure in the world. You've already been through that, done that, realized its fickleness, and by prior practice, you're carried on. He who even, and then he says, look, this is the verse. Through persevering effort and controlled mind, right? You effort, that's the yatna. Here's the yatna that we're looking at. Here, I'll blow it up. The prayatna is the same as yatna. You see it? The prayatna, right? So the yatna, through that yatna and controlled mind, the yogi cleansed of evil, right? The kleshas, all of that, and perfected through many births. So how about that for what a long time means? And the commentators all point to this verse in the Gita. The Patanjalian commentators, that verse we looked at, right? That Abhyasa Vairagya, right? So Abhyasa is the yatna. Well, here's the yatna. We just looked at the yatna. That's verse 14. And then verse 15, it says, Dirgha Kala, long time. Look, many births. Actually, the text says aneka, not one. Literally, it means, it doesn't actually mean many, it means not one. So you see how these texts are all assuming each other, they're all in communication with each other, and I can't believe it. I've lost I minimized it, and it's lost. And I don't get it. Where does it go? If I scroll, it doesn't come back. So then I have to go back.
Why don't you go to the tab?
Which tab?
We are looking at two tabs here. One says chapter 6 and the other says Yoga Sutras.
Really?
Hmm.
Oh. Okay, but that isn't always the case. Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Dirgha Kala, why did we do all that? Let's just connect what we just did in the Gita. We found the words Abhyasa Vairagya in the Gita, in the same section. Arjuna says, I can't do it. Mind's too fickle. Krishna says, yes, you can. Abhyasa Vairagya. He uses those two words. Then he says yatna, same. He says prayatna, same thing. Effort. And then he says, and then Patanjali says Dirgha Kala. Patanjali says, for a long time. And this is pathetic, isn't it? I know it is. Okay. For a long time. And then we read the verse in Gita where Krishna says, Aneka Janma, more than one birth. Okay. So Abhyasa has to be effort for a long time. Okay. Don't think. And so definitely this lifetime. Definitely this lifetime. Don't think it means a year or 10 years or 15 years, my friends. And don't be discouraged if you feel you're not making any progress. The number of times I wake up and think I've been at it this 45 years and I'm just the same idiot I was as a teenager. The number of times I encounter the same kleshas I had when I was young, and I feel a little hopeless. Krishna says, no, 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 no. Pack it in, pack it in, pack it in. Fill in your spiritual bank account, because next life you start right where you left off. So Dirgha Kala. Now, Nirantarya, no interruptions, my friends. It's not that you feel like it one day, you don't feel like it that. You do japa. If you do japa every day, if you take Diksha, initiation into a traditional lineage, you're told to do your japa every day. Your meditation has a daily practice, whether you feel like it or not. Whether your friend is coming to visit or not, you do japa every day without fail. That's Nair Antarya. And Satkara Sevita with respect. Satkar. This is a honorable, noble practice, meditation handed down by great beings. Don't get despondent. Don't get angry if you feel you're going nowhere. Because what's the option? You go back to suffering and trying to find happiness in the same old conditioned behavior patterns that have caused you frustration in the first place. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing yoga. You wouldn't be doing this kind of yoga if you weren't frustrated with mundane experience on some level. So that's abhyasa. Once again, effort, verse 13, and long time, no interruptions, respectfully. What's about vairagya? That's the other limb of nirodha. And vairagya is a state of mind. Abhyasa is what you do. Vairagya is a state of mind. And what kind of state of mind is it? First of all, it vashikara sanya. It's a state of mind of one who's controlling the mind. Eventually, it becomes sattvic. But initially, and for maybe certainly this lifetime, the mind is tamasic and rajasic. So you have to control it and slowly, mold it into a place of sattva. Don't think that's easy for us Westerners, my friends, especially, and modern day Indians. We are living in a consumer culture. We've grown up to consume. That's raga. We've grown up we've been indoctrinated that the goal of life is to enjoy the world, raga, as long as you do it dharmically, okay? If you have a slightly higher type of cultural system, then you have codes of morality and ethics and dharmas, and you try to not harm your fellow citizens. You have maybe higher order principles, but the goal is still, as long as we're in avidya, the goal is to enjoy the body mind, enjoy your relationships, emotions, right? So so therefore, to make the mind to be free of that and make the mind sattvic, to become detached from that way of thinking, avidya way of thinking, but I am body mind way of thinking, and make the mind into a brahmasmi, I am Atman, right? And my goal is the Atman, and my goal is Bhagavan, to sort of mold the mind into that way of thinking. It takes vashikara. It's kind of similar to yatna. Vashikara is to exert control. So vairagya is a samjna, a state of controlled consciousness of one who is free of thirst. Thirst for what? Sense objects, vishaya. If you're free of thirst for sense object, whether you've drishta, seen them, or heard about them, it means being free of desire, my friends. And we read the Gita, or have we not read the Gita? A fifth of the Gita, a quarter of the Gita, every single verse, 25% of the verses, free of desire, free of desire, free of desire. Second noble truth, third noble truth of Buddhism, second noble truth of Buddhism. Everything is frustration, and there's a cause. What is it? Desire. So this is where yoga comes into conflict with consumer culture, which requires consumer culture requires the aggravation of desire, the agitation of desire, in order to consume and have a healthy economy. Right? Production is up, manufacturing is up, and now we consider that healthy society. And you have access to resources, you have spending power, and you can consume. That's the opposite of yoga. So it's difficult for us, even yogis. We still, like my guru would say, you want to, aap log 50-50 wale hai. I know I love to say that, and you've heard it so many times. 50-50 wale hai. You're all 50-50. You would think you can have your bhoga and your yoga. And most of us, if we think about it honestly, would probably have to admit that. So vairagya is the vashikara samjna, the control mind of one who is without thirst for vishaya, sense objects, whether you've experienced them and they have a memory of them and you want to have it again, or you've heard about it. Technically, this is about the celestial Vedic realms, but I don't want to get into that. The celestial realms that are the goal of Vedic ritualism is that which you have heard about, the Shruti. So this is Anushravika. So if actually anybody reading this 1,000 years ago, or even 500 years ago, they would have understood that this heard about is the desire to attain the celestial realm after this life, because the celestial realm is still samsara. So, so therefore, in Vedic culture, The goal of Vedic ritualism is not moksha, it's not liberation, it's a celestial realm. That's the goal of Vedic ritualism, the Mimamsa school that we will have to do one. I am really looking forward to doing Mimamsa with you. I know we won't get 200 people, but we might get 30. Right, so that's the first, one more sutra and we're done, my friends. So that's Vairagya. And then Tat Param, higher than that. There's a higher Vairagya, just like we saw with sense perception. There was Loka and Alokika. There was lower, mundane, and higher. Well, there's a higher Vairagya, higher than just disinterest in sense objects. That's mundane sense objects. But what's higher than that? Vai, without, Trishna. There's your Vitrishna in verse 15, Vitrishna in the middle, Vai Trishna, don't worry about Vai Vi, same thing. Trishna is thirst, it's a big word in Buddhism. So is disinterest in the gunas. What does that mean? Everything Prakritic. There's Purusha and Prakriti. What is Prakriti? The three gunas. So if you're disinterested in everything Prakritic, then what are you interested in? Purusha Kyatir, when the mind becomes absorbed in Purusha. That's the only way you can be actually indifferent to the gunas, which means nothing material is of interest to you anymore. The bliss of the Atman, and even the bliss of, before you get to the Nirbija Atman, even in Sabija Samadhi, which is not the end of the journey, what is Ananda Samadhi? What is that? Out of the four Samadhis, Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda. Even that, the mind itself, not the Atman, not the bliss of the Atman, but the mind itself can become intensely blissful. The Prakritic mind, and then loses interest in anything else Prakritic. Even that bliss of the Sattvic Ananda Samadhi mind is nothing compared to the Ananda of the Satchidananda Nirbija Svarupa Vastanam. So therefore there is a lower Vairagya, which is the control mind of one without thirst for sense objects, whether experienced or heard about. And then there's Tat Param, higher than that, is Guna Vaitrishnya, indifferent to the entire Prakritic manifestation. The gunas means everything. Everything is the gunas other than Purusha. And then put that, and where does that come to be? Purusha Kyatir, when the mind is absorbed in Purusha, and that is, I would say, Ananda Samadhi. It's not Nirbija, but it's Ananda Samadhi. All right, my friends? So let's put it all very quickly together and we'll take questions. So we had Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the stilling of the mind, okay? And right, memorize that. I'm going to quiz you. And then Tada Drashtu Sarupe Vastanam. Then there is a situatedness in its own nature of the seer. The seer abides in its own nature. Otherwise, what's it doing if it's not abiding in its own nature? 4. Vritti sarupyam itaratra, otherwise it's absorbed in the vrittis. Okay, what are these vrittis? Pancha, there's 5 kinds. Okay, fine, what else? Well, these 5 kinds are actually klishta or aklishta, so there's, in a sense, there's 10 vrittis, but there's 5 categories of vrittis. They could be klishta or aklishta. What are these 5 vrittis? Well, the first one is right knowledge. Oh, here they are listed. Remember, he gives a list and then he goes through them one by one. Right knowledge, wrong knowledge, error, metaphoric thinking, deep sleep, memory. Fair enough. What's the first one? Right knowledge, subdivided into 3. You can get right knowledge through your senses, correct inferences, and bona fide words, and this can pertain to mundane reality. These 3 ways of knowing mundane reality, but the non-mundane reality, Purusha and Bhagavan, can also be known through these 3 ways. You can have a vision, it's called darshana, of God, or you can have a sarupa vastanam, experience of your Atman. You can infer these 2 entities exist by following the logic of the Nyaya school, and you can receive words about both of them through the sacred scriptures of many traditions of the world, but of course India very richly represented in terms of its revelations, if you will, of these truths, right? So what's wrong knowledge? Well, it's false knowledge, and it's atadrupa pratishtam. It's situated in the not that nature of a thing. So I think the tree is a post. Well, it's tadrupa. It's tadrupa is a tree. I think it's a post. So I'm seeing, I have a vritti, but it's the atadrupa. Okay. And then what is metaphor? It follows the usage of words. We all use metaphor, conventional speech, but vastu sunyo, it doesn't really have an object. Time flies is not an object in the way a tree is. A tree can be perceived accurately, then it's pramana. It can be seen inaccurately. That's the second vritti, it's error. But what about metaphor? Doesn't fit into either of those. Then a philosopher needs to account for it, put it in a category of its own. Deep sleep is also a vritti, and he needs to put the word vritti in. Otherwise, we might think, well, it's not a vritti, it's an absence of vritti. No, it's a vritti, but what's absent is any content. Above a pratyaya. Fair enough. What's smriti? What's memory? It's a sense object that has been experienced that doesn't slip away. So either direct memory in your conscious waking state is memory, dream is memory, but just you're not in control of the sense objects. The Vishaya, learn that word, Vishaya, sense object. It's all over the Gita. So a sense object. And memory, it could be just regular memory. I remember where it doesn't slip away. I remember where I put my keys, it didn't slip away. Or it can be in dream, but now I don't have control over it. And in fantasy, well, I do have control over it, but I'm putting together my memories in a fictional way, and that would be reverie and so forth, right? Okay, and then we have to nirodha all of them, whether they're klishta or aklishta. And how do you do that? You practice and dispassion and detachment. What is this practice? It's tatra stito yatna, the effort to be situated, keep your mind fixed on your object of meditation, your mantra, whatever that may be. And my friends, dirgha kala, this is important for us. These two words are probably the most important things for us if you want to do yoga, not just study it. Dirgha kala, for a long time. Don't imagine that it's going to be this, otherwise you'll get despondent and give it up. Krishna says, aneka janma, many births. I'm stressing this. I'm stressing it because I've had many despondent moments in my own journey. I've now been 45 years since I started. Okay, long time. And Nirantarya, every day. That's a tapas sometimes. Sometimes it's great, smooth sailing, wonderful. Not all the time. Tamas kicks in and you want to go back to sleep. Or you just say, oh, I'm not getting anything out of this. Give it up. Tamas. So Nirantarya, no interruption. Satkara, with respect. And there's a higher, and then what about this vairagya? It's the controlled mind, it's not magic. This is the same as tapas. If you do tapas, you get vairagya. Tapas is what you do, and vairagya is the state of mind that comes from it. And what is this tapas? Is you control the senses. And what is the vairagya then? The mind is free of sense, of thirst, desire. For vishaya, there's your vishaya again. It's free of thirst for vishayas or sense objects, whether you've experienced them yourself, drishta, or anushravika, you heard about them. And then finally, by the time you get to this tatparam, higher than that, this is way up there now. There's no going back. There's no going back for any of us, my friends. Just so you know, you can walk away from this. But these are not like regular samskaras. They'll come back next life. The yogic samskaras are not of the same metaphysical nature. They may be the same in one sense metaphysically, but they are inherent in the yogic samskaras from the studies. There's a certain potency, a shakti. It's called a shakti. You've all heard the word shakti, but shakti means different things. And these samskaras have a shakti. Unlike other samskaras, you can't remember anything from your past life. We can't remember anything. Occasionally, you might have a deja vu. And when these scholars I was talking about, they're collecting past life experiences. Usually, it's kids 2 or 3 years old. There are exceptions, but almost all of them are very young. They have to catch them when they're young. So you don't remember anything of your past life. But yogic samskaras are not like that. They have a different Shakti. Because the texts are considered to be embodiments of Brahman. That's why it's called Shabda Brahman. It's Shabda Brahman. It's Brahman in the form of words. And therefore, the Shakti of when you do your Svadhyaya next life will that Shakti is that which, it's like a power, it's that which causes something to happen, Shak. So the Shakti of these samskaras will cause these samskaras to reemerge in the mind. You won't remember the exact, the sutras that you memorize, but there'll be an intense, kind of impulsion to study these texts. They'll seem very familiar when you do. And you'll be intensely attracted to them to the extent that you were in this life. You pick right up where you left off. And we just read the verse in the Gita. So these samskaras, so therefore, so vairagya then, that's the sign of yogic advancement. If you want to ask the question, what kind of progress am I making? Here's the answer right now. How much vairagya do I have? How detached am I from the vishaya? How much have I, vishaya vitrishnasya, have I lost the thirst for sense objects? Okay, and eventually, tatparam, we lose interest for everything made of the gunas. And the only way that can happen, the mind has got to do something. So if the mind is not absorbed in the pleasures of the gunas, in doing things in the gunas that we call life, then what's it doing? Well, it's absorbed in the Purusha. That's kind of Jnana Yoga, and these are the practices. So that's it for today, my friends. And I hope you don't mind my Rajasic style of teaching. And we got tons of comments here. I don't know whether I need to, I don't need to look at anything there. Any questions?
Yes.
Can I ask a
Yeah.
question?
Yes, please, yes.
It has to do with the word smriti, the memory.
Yes.
Does that include the samskaras and the vasana as a part of the smriti?
Well, some vasanas are usually, it's hard to find a distinction. But I remember it's been 10 years since I did the Yoga Sutras, at least, maybe more than that. But but in one commentary, the vasanas tended to be associated with past life samskaras. So they're both, vasana is a samskara. Everything's a samskara. Anything in the mind is a samskara. One commentator even says avidya is a type of samskara. But when it's past life, and therefore kind of deep, maybe a deep level kind of personality trait that's coming from a past life, then it's called a vasana. And if it's samskara, then it could, but it could also be past life samskara. You could use the word samskara for past lives as well. But I don't think you use the word vasana for active samskaras of this life, unless they've been reactivated from a past life. So vasana, in my understanding, at least according to one commentary, and I read all the commentaries, all the traditional commentaries for all the sutras, and as I recall, it's been a long time, there was only one that actually clearly and precisely made this distinction. You might find this distinction made in Vedanta commentaries or elsewhere, and that was what it was. Vasana is past life, so deep level, what Freud would call the, I guess, subconscious or even unconscious, and the samskaras are conscious. So that's smriti. And if they don't slip away, it's smriti. Then it's smriti. They don't asampramoshaha, they don't slip away.
So smriti does include samskaras. Basically, that was my question, right?
Smriti is samskara, it's nothing
Yes,
else.
samskara.
And then what else is there? There's nothing in the mind, there's nothing in the mind except samskara.
Is there a way to distinguish between smriti and samskara? Because the one place I read somewhere that samskara means that there is something like a raga dvesha attached to your memory, Otherwise, if it's a pure knowledge, then it's just smriti. Is that distinction possible?
Well, that's not the Yoga Sutra. That's not Patanjali. I mean, different texts may say different things. Patanjali says smriti is the not. We just read it. We can read it again. Okay, let's just go back to this sutra. What is this? Smriti, it is the not slipping away of an object, not necessarily desire. Smriti, Vishaya asampramoshaha, the not slipping away of an object that has been experienced. Any object. That's Patanjali's definition of memory. It could be a desire, but it's not exclusively a desire.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Charles.
Ah, yes, thank you. This was to do with the comment about indifference towards the gunas, and that sort of got me thinking about Sankhya and yoga, and whether really this whole approach of disentangling Purusha from Prakriti is one that sort of contributes to and is part of that whole approach in Indian philosophies that's kind of not interested in the world, but in its salvation is escape away from the world.
Yeah.
Rather than all this is Brahman too, the whole Prakritic phenomena is also Brahman, and so we might engage with it in some way. Is that right? Am I sort of thinking the right way?
Yeah, this is part of the Patanjali is definitely nivritti, part of inaction. But there are parts of action where you could still see the world, everything is Brahman, and that would be the karma yoga of the Gita. They still, the metaphysics is the same, there's Purusha and Prakriti, but in karma yoga, then rather than renounce the world, you remain active doing Dharma. But in the Jnana traditions, that would be Sankhya, that would be Advaita Vedanta, and that would be Patanjali, and various Buddhist, some Theravada Buddhist traditions, and I suppose Nyaya. In the Jnana traditions, yeah, there is a stress on renouncing the world. Now, yoga is the most extreme of that, because you don't just block out the world, but you close down the mind itself. Whereas in Jnana yoga, you don't close down the mind, at least. You renounce the world as much as possible, right? So Shankara is not interested in Dharma. He's not interested in, action in the world. But you use the mind for liberation. So your mind is active, but it's absorbed in Jnana teachings. And because these Jnana teachings are coming from the Upanishads, and because the Upanishads are Shabda Brahman, sound Brahman, then by absorbing the mind in the Upanishads, which is Jnana, and the Vedanta, by absorbing the mind in that, the mind is absorbed in Brahman, you don't have to close it down, and then you have a eureka moment where all of a sudden, rather than just the mind being absorbed in the words, all of a sudden your perception, you actually have a eureka experience of everything being Brahman, including the world itself. But at that point, there isn't a world, at least not in Advaita Vedanta. The world is a mirage and it evaporates, but the mind is used, you don't nirodha it, you absorb it in the jnana of the Upanishads. But Gita allows, is not Krishna says a sannyasi is one who renounces the desire to enjoy the world. It doesn't renounce the world itself or action in the world. So that's the Bhagavad Gita's sort of contribution to the possibilities of yoga.
Okay, great. Well, that's really interesting. You're touching on another area I'm a bit confused about, is what the knowledge path really means, and what's being said about how you know what you know, because these 6 pramanas that some traditions buy into and some don't seem to include, except through perhaps scripture referring to yogi's experience, doesn't seem to say that the yogic experience. They'll talk about sensory perception, but not the yogic actual direct experience. So, and I read Gavin Flood saying something about Shankara really kind of not being very supportive of the idea of yogic meditation as leading to that enlightenment, that it was action in itself rather than knowledge. And I thought, well, what is this path of knowledge? What kind of knowledge? Surely more than intellectual and cognitive. But it sounds like you're saying that there's a kind of eureka moment that comes from studying
Well, before
which-
that, though, but Shankara is not favorable to Chittavritti Nirodha yoga. By meditation, meaning the classical, because the word meditation is a bit loose now in the West. It means, sitting on a beach and looking at the moon. But the classical understanding of yoga in the Vedika traditions is Patanjali's Chittavritti Nirodha. Shankara is not. He doesn't reject it, but his process is Jnana Yoga, and just what I said, the mind is absorbed in the Upanishads because the Upanishads are Brahman.
Okay.
So therefore, you don't have to Nirodha the mind, you have to just focus them constantly in the Upanishads, and then when you're not studying the actual text, you're walking around repeating the Mahavakyas, the great sayings of the Upanishads. You're constantly keeping your mind fixed on those, not in a Nirodha sort of way. And then you're looking at the world and trying to perceive its temporal nature. You see the fleeting. You're training your mind to see things as the Upanishads are teaching you to see them. So in a sense, it's all a bit of an artificial, it's all a kind of a, you could say an artificial construct. You wouldn't be wrong. It's just that word has negative connotations. Yes, you're artificially trying to construct your mind and mold it to seeing things and in the way the Upanishads have taught. And then if you do that, then all of a sudden, the artificial meaning is made of samskaras, made of prakritic stuff, your Mahavakyas, your contemplation of the verses and the teachings. It's all mind stuff. It's all samskara. But at a certain point, and it dissolves, and the actual reality of Brahman, you have the eureka moment. But all processes are like that. Patanjali's process is the same, Nirodha, but there's got to be an eureka moment between Asmita Samadhi and Nirbija Samadhi. There's got to be a moment where the consciousness is absorbed in the mind, but the mind is in this high Samadhi, Sabija states. And then all of a sudden there's a Nirbija state where consciousness is no longer absorbed in the mind, but it's Svarupa. Same in Bhakti. You're meditating on your Krishna or your Ram or your Devi. It's an artificial construct. You have what is your image of Krishna? Some picture you saw, you've patched together an image, or maybe the deity of your temple in your village. Or it might be you read the stories and you patch together, a blue, like the blue that in this world, and you stick a peacock feather in it. It's an artificial construct. But what if you do it intensely, then all of a sudden the mind dissolves and Krishna appears in his rupa. So all of these processes require the mind. And until you get there, you could say they're all an artificial construct. Fair enough. But then,
Thank you.
yeah,
Great.
Okay.
Really
All right.
great. Thank you.
Cheers. Yeah.
Cheers.
Sylvia.
Hi, Edwin.
Hi.
Can you tell me if Atman, Brahman, and Bhagavan, are they all the same thing, or is there a nuance that's different? Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, usually, Atman and Brahman can be interchangeable, but usually Atman refers to your own little spark of Brahman within you. And usually Brahman is the cosmic one, because in the beginning of Vedanta Sutra, Atato Brahma Jigyasa Janmadhyasya Yataha. Brahman is that from which creation comes. So therefore, Brahman is usually the ultimate truth defined as the ultimate truth underpinning creation. And Atman is the spark of that Brahman that animates all living beings. Now, the relationship between Atman and Brahman is what distinguishes the Vedanta traditions. Right? So Advaita Vedanta says Atman is Brahman. There's no difference at all. Advaita, no difference at all. And the Vaishnava traditions like the, Krishnamacharya, they say, no, the Atman is eternal. It's a spark of Brahman, but eternally individual. It never merges. So there's a little bit of dualism there. Okay.
And who's Bhagavan?
So now, for Shankara, Brahman is the highest truth, and everything else is illusory, including ultimately Bhagavan. So in other words, sorry?
Who is he?
Who is Bhagavan? For Shankara.
Oh, that's Bhagavan. That's the only one, or do they call a lot of them Bhagavans?
Well, Shankara was a Vaishnava. You see, Shankara has conventional reality and ultimate reality. This is the big question, Sylvia, which, so Brahman and Bhagavan are the same thing. But when we use the term Bhagavan, we're specifically referring to the personal aspect of Brahman.
Oh, okay.
So when we use the term Bhagavan, we're talking about Vishnu and Shiva. These are all personal manifestations. And yeah, Brahman just means the ultimate truth. It doesn't really tell us, it doesn't indicate whether it's personal or impersonal. Just
I
means
see.
the ultimate truth. And the personalists are the Vaishnavas. And they say Brahman is personal, Vishnu, Narayan, Krishna. And the impersonalists would be the Advaita school. And they would say Brahman is ultimately impersonal, and everything else is ultimately a mirage, actually.
So the realized beings that are on this planet, they're all Bhagavans.
Well, they fall into both categories.
Oh, okay.
There are
Yeah.
realized beings that have seen Bhagavan, and they've had visions of Vishnu and Krishna, and then they say, well, this is the ultimate truth. And then there are other realized beings. Remember what I said last class? Yogis are realizing different things. Why do we think the truth is one? That's a 19th century cliche, that yatomat tatopat, that all, that the truth may be one in one sort of sense, but that doesn't mean it's homogeneous. There's the Rig Vedic saying the truth is one, and the sages call it by different names, but that doesn't mean that one truth is devoid of differentiation within it. It's a long discussion, Sylvia.
Okay, thank you.
All right. But Bhagavan is the personal aspect of Brahman. And now which is higher, personal or impersonal, that's what separates the Vedanta traditions. Vaishnavas say the personal Godhead is supreme. And the Advaita says, no, impersonal Brahman is the highest. So they're going to be differences. And both of those traditions have enlightened beings that are perceiving their truths. So either we say one is right and one is wrong, or we say that they're both experiencing truth, but the truth itself is variegated.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank
it could be one and simultaneously variegated within it. The Jains have a beautiful example of the diamond. It's one, but it has many facets. So it's one, but it's also multifaceted. That's a much healthier way. That for me is how I perceive all the different claims that the different traditions, they're not saying the same thing, Sylvia. They're not saying the same thing about what the grand ultimate goal is. We have to honor what they're saying, not try to force them into one little mold. In this, yatomat tatopat. Okay, well, we could spend a long time on that one. Okay, take care. Neela.
Pranam.
Pranamji.
Bryant.
Pranam.
I have a question. It's kind of a very small question, but when you talk about the right knowledge, which is perception by the senses, we see sun as rising and setting, but our inference is actually wrong, right?
Yeah.
So how do we explain that in terms of this particular verse? Because it says connection of the sense faculty with the object. It doesn't depend on the language. We all see it.
Yeah.
It's accurate. We see that, like the sun is always rising and falling, setting
Yeah.
right in the east end, right? But
Yeah.
but our inference about it, or our, it's really not the right knowledge.
Well, unless you want to, yeah, that's an interesting question. But then you could also say something like, well, we see the tree, but really the tree is a bunch of subatomic, entities held together by forces like gravity, and so it's seeing a tree. Is that also, I don't know what Nyaya would say. I mean, they knew they knew absolutely their whole metaphysics is built on subatomic, that all things are ultimately atoms. So, but we're not perceiving them. So I don't think they're talking about that kind of deep level metaphysical makeup, because they did posit forces and subatomic particles. So they knew that on that level. So therefore, I think they're just talking about conventional perception. And the Nyaya's realism is that it has to work. They're very practical. They're practicalists. So therefore, it works if I need to see the tree, because I need to get some wood, because I need to heat the house. It works that I see it as a tree rather than a bunch of molecules. Now, your specific example of the sun rising and setting, and we see it rising, so we perceive it rising. I would think, I'm guessing here, if I were in Nyayika, I would say, okay, that inference would tells us that it's not actually rising and setting. And so therefore, in terms of just functional practicality, we see it rising and setting, so it's practical, so we know we have to get up now, and we have to make breakfast, and then and then it's setting. So practically speaking, that sense perception from a practical point of view, we can think of it as, rising and setting. So we structure our day around it. So they're functionalists, right? They're realists and functionalists. But probably they might agree that fine, on another level, inference tells us, or words tell us from our scientists, and they knew about, the earth, and they knew about the planets and all of that. But inference tells us that it's not actually, and therefore inference gives us another type of knowledge that is theoretical. It's not practical, but theoretically it's not actually rising and setting. So I don't know. I'm just throwing out my speculation. I'm putting on a Nyayika hat, and if I were a Nyayika and I had to answer a question like that, that's what I would say. But they certainly knew that the sun wasn't actually rising and setting. Actually, yeah.
So basically, it is like using it in practical sense, not.
They were practicalists, and I think their pramanas are about, and practical means it has to work. They actually say it like that. We have to be able to, it has to be able to sort of, function in our day-to-day lives. And they, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That's the best I could do. I'm not sure that's a great answer, but that's the best I could do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So then we have, is that Sarah?
Namaskar. Can you hear me okay?
Namaskar. Yes, I can. Yes.
Yeah, after last week's session, I've been wondering about the chitta in relation to Purusha and Prakriti, because we're talking about chitta vritti nirodha.
Yeah.
But yet, is this, at certain times you said consciousness was outside the mind, but yet it's not really Purusha, is it?
Consciousness is Purusha, yeah.
It is, okay.
Purusha is the substance, Atman, Purusha, and consciousness is its quality.
Ah, wonderful.
Yeah, so the quality of Purusha, yes, in Yoga and Sankhya, not in Advaita Vedanta, that's different. But in Yoga and Sankhya and Nyaya and much of Vedanta, not Advaita Vedanta, but other Vedanta. So consciousness is the property of the Atman. Chitta is Prakriti. No, yeah, where we're getting confused here is chitta. Okay, chitta with a double T is the mind, and it's made of Prakriti. Chit with a single T is another word for consciousness. And that's where there could be confusion. So what is consciousness called in Sanskrit? It's called chit or chitti shakti or chaitana. There's different words, but chit with a single T is completely and utterly different from chitta with a double T. So therefore, Purusha, also known as Atman, also known by various other names, Patanjali calls it the Siya, is a substance that has the quality of chit or chitti shakti with one T. And it is absorbed in Prakriti. The immediate layer of Prakriti surrounding the Atman is the chitta with double T. That's the immediate adjacent layer that Atman cannot contact, the consciousness cannot contact the world directly, because if there was no mind, you would be omniscient. Your consciousness wouldn't perceive the entire, would be conscious of the entire world. But karmically, we're not eligible for that. And so therefore, our consciousness is limited depending on our karma. Can everybody mute themselves, please? Consciousness is limited by this thing called chitta, but not to be confused with chit.
Thank you, because I think last time you were talking about chitta being buddhi, ahankar,
and manas, yes, exactly.
manas.
Yes.
And I was
Yes.
like, oh, so
Yeah.
thank you. That's really clarified.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah. Marco.
Hello, Edwin.
Hello.
I have a question maybe related to what you just mentioned about this eureka moment. So how can we consider this eureka moment right knowledge within the Patanjali tradition? Because right knowledge is mostly direct experience, one of the aspects of right knowledge, and this is via the senses, and this is a vritti, and we want to nirodha the vrittis. So how can it be right knowledge of the
Well,
Atman,
he doesn't call it right knowledge.
Okay.
He doesn't call it right knowledge. But right knowledge, remember, can be lokika or alokika. It can be mundane, or remember we discussed that? The right knowledge can be lokika, or things of this world, and alokika is things not of this world, like the Atman. But it's knowledge of. And all of it has to be nirodha. Klishta and aklishta. All the vrittis. Yes, because it's a vritti. Knowledge is a vritti. So when you're in the Svarupa state, there's no knowledge at all. If knowledge means content, there's no content in Svarupa Vastanam. The only content is consciousness itself. Consciousness is conscious of consciousness. There's no other content. Any other content, it would be in the chitta. So when the consciousness is Svarupa Vastanam, it's not absorbed in the chitta. It's absorbed in its own nature. There's no content. So there's no knowledge there. If by knowledge you mean knowledge of something, no, there's no knowledge of anything other than Svarupa. There's awareness of awareness itself.
And then, so how this liberated beings could recall such a state if there is no knowledge being created or memory being created?
You don't, there is no, when you come out of that state, there's no memory of it.
Okay.
And then you could say, well, why would I want to go back into it? Well, all we know is that when great beings come out of the state, that they are not interested in anything in the world, whatever that, we call it bliss. The Upanishads call that state bliss, but we don't know what that means, because when we think of bliss, we can only think of our little Kodak moments in this world. But they call it ananda, and they try to quantify it. It's amazing. They say it's millions of times greater than any experience in Prakriti. But there's no memory of it. So then you could say, well, why would you want to go back if you didn't? Normally you want to buy an ice cream because you have a memory that I had an ice cream last week and it was good. And the desire for an ice cream is the reactivation of that memory. So normally we want to do something because we have memory that thing is good, but there's no memory in the nirvijna state. So therefore, there's no imprint of it on the mind. So therefore, why would you want to go back? I don't know how to answer that question, other than by saying the beings in that attain that, they have, even Patanjali just said, we read it, guna vetrishnam, no interest in anything made of the gunas. And then either they have an option, either they just stay in that state. Now, of course, there's still karma, because this life has been activated. They're never going to be born again, but they still have to live out the rest of this life. So what do they do with the rest of this life? Their options are either go back into that state as often as they can, or they go out into the world and try to share their experience with others. And those are our teachers, and that's why we offer them our respect, because they didn't choose to sit in a cave and just try to remain in that state. But whatever it is, there's no words to describe it. If you say it's bliss, we only our understanding of bliss is only of a material experience. We don't have any experience of anything other than prakritic pleasure.
Okay, thank you. So that means it's beyond, beyond knowledge,
beyond the
senses,
mind,
beyond
beyond the
language.
mind, beyond language, beyond the mind. There's no samskara for it. When that experience does not imprint itself in the mind as a samskara, any other experience leaves an imprint of itself on the mind. So then you can go and remember it because you have the imprint. But that nirbija experience is not imprinted on the mind. So when you come out of that state, there's no imprint. There's nothing you can say. So all you can say is, well, it is, and it's blissful. You have to use, you say something like it's blissful, but you can't really explain what you mean by that. So then how do we know it's good? Well, the only way how do you know, why should it be desirable? Well, one thing we know is that those who attain it never want anything, they have absolutely no interest in anything prakritic anymore. So that's testimony of some sort. If they have absolutely no interest in anything prakritic, that means whatever that state is, it transcends and surpasses anything prakritic. So that much information we can infer.
Yes.
Okay.
And this will differ from Svarupa from Bhagavan because this could leave an imprint.
Well, yes,
could take form.
yes. Bhagavan can leave an imprint, and that imprint can overwhelm the mind. And completely, if you have a darshan of Bhagavan, then your mind is completely absorbed in Bhagavan. And even if Bhagavan disappears, that imprint will remain with you for the rest of this life. And then when you die, in the Vaishnava traditions, you get a body made of pure consciousness in the divine realm of Bhagavan, and you spend eternity in relationship with Bhagavan. You don't spend eternity in your Svarupa Vastanam. You spend eternity in these Brahman realms. They're not prakritic. They're made of pure consciousness, condensed consciousness, and you get a form, and you interact with Bhagavan according to whatever your type of love you have. Different flavors of love. That's a story for another day. Okay, Marco.
Yep.
Take care. Yeah. Okay, John. We had your Vairagya verse today.
Yes, we did. Thank you.
Yes.
I had a question about Purusha Kyatir and Viveka Kyatir. Are they pramana? Alokita pramana?
Yes. Yeah.
Or are they Svarupa Vastana?
No, they're not. They're not Svarupa Vastanam because that would be Svarupa. This is a state of mind, not of the Sva.
Okay, good enough.
Yeah. So and I would say that Viveka Kyatir and Purusha Kyatir could be the same. I would say Purusha Kyatir is a little stronger though, because
Right.
the mind is actually reflecting the Purusha. I would correlate that with Asmita Samadhi. Whereas Viveka Kyatir is just a very high state of jnana. The Viveka Kyatir that you get when you do Ashtanga Yoga, right? Yoganga Nushtanad, Ashudikshaye. No, where is the Viveka Kyatir verse?
Viveka Kyatir Viplava Anopaya.
Oh, that's how you destroy. Yeah, Viveka. Okay.
That's how you get the Kaivalya.
Yeah. Okay, so that I wouldn't put that on the same level as Purusha Kyatir. I mean, obviously there are similar sorts of things, but the Purusha Kyatir to me would be Asmita Samadhi. The mind is actually reflecting Atman back to itself. Okay. And they talk about it being like a mirror.
Oh, okay.
And it reflects, the mirror of the mind in a pure mirror. It's still mediated though. It's not direct. It's not Svarupa. The Rupa of the Atman is imprinted on the mind. So therefore it's Asmi. It's not the bad Asmita. It's not the Klesha Asmita. It's the real Asmi. The mind is actually reflecting Purusha back to itself. It's like looking at your face in a mirror. You're still a reflection. It's not the real face. It's a reflection, but it is a reflection of the real thing. So it's still a sabija state. Asmita Samadhi.
Yet in that second pada, where they talk about Viveka Kyatir Viplava Anopaya, they talk about that as the way to enlightenment or liberation.
Yeah, let's look at the verse. It's in
means
chapter
to
2.
Liberation is uninterrupted discriminative discernment.
Right. So how do we break free of suffering? It comes in the suffering section, right?
Right.
cause of suffering is the drashta drishayo samyogaha, okay? And it's caused by tasya hetora vidya. Avidya is the cause of the samyoga, the coming together of the seer and the seen, right? When that's absent, when the avidya is absent, then samyoga is absent. And and what is the means? And hana means freedom. What is the means of freedom? Aviplava. Aviplava. No uninterrupted viveka kyatir.
Right.
State of the mind is, that's kind of a jnana yoga state, if you ask me. When the jnana yoga, is when your mind is absolutely pervaded by only thinking about the truth of the Atman. And so that's, I would not put that as the same as Purusha Kyatir, where you're actually, that to me sounds more like Asmita Samadhi, but these are minor details.
And what samadhi would you call Viveka Kyatir?
I wouldn't call that a Samadhi.
You wouldn't?
No, because I would put Viveka with Vidya, which is more a Jnana Yoga, which the mind is not in a Nirodha state.
Okay.
All of the Samadhis are Nirodha states. They're all Nirodha states. That's why they come, that's Dharana, Dhyana, and okay, the mind, and then you go, then Samadhi, your mind is fixed at that point. But Jnana Yoga is not, we spoke before, it's not a fixed state of mind. It's, the mind is flowing, but it's flowing only the content of the flowing mind is only jnana, it's only knowledge, it's only the Mahavakyas, it's only the Upanishadic teachings. I would think Viveka by def is vivich. It's the ability to distinguish. The word itself, Viveka, is a reduplicative, right? So you have vich, and then it reduplicates. It becomes vivich, right? So vich is to distinguish one thing from another. So if you're distinguishing one thing for another, it's still a kind of a Jnana Yoga type activity when you're distinguishing Prakriti from Purusha. It's not yeah.
The sense that I had was that Viveka was the product of one point of thought, ekagrita, and that by, that there was a perception or an intuition of prasada by that focus. And that's
well, hang on. Let's see where the word where it comes. In verse 28, Viveka comes from Yog Anga Anushtanad, from following the limbs of yoga. What happens? First of all, Ashuddhikshaye. The impurities are removed. Okay, that's nice. Now, when the impurities are removed, Jnana Dipti, now the light can shine. It's not covered by impurities anymore. So
Right.
There's the light of knowledge. Now, how far can that shine, that light? All the way up to Viveka Kyatir. The mind now is absorbed in Viveka. I wouldn't call that Samadhi. I would call that a high kind of Jnana Yoga state.
Okay.
So there's the light of Jnana, which goes all the way up to Vivich. That at this point, there is the word itself says the ability to separate. Viveka, from Vich, Sanskrit verb Vich. So that I would call that a state of discrimination, but not just a theoretical one,
Right.
deep realization of the distinction between the real and the non-real, the sat and the asat. But I would call it a Jnana Yoga state myself.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to,
not an experience of prasada, more the ability to discern between what's not prasada.
yes. Where is the prasada verse? Let's look at it.
I think it's Nirvichara by Sharadye.
Which verse?
Prasada.
Which verse is
47 in 1.
147.
First part of 47. Right?
147.
Nirvichara by Sharadye Adhyatma Prasada.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I wouldn't call this. This is Nirvichara. It's a samadhi state. I wouldn't correlate this with Viveka. This is when the mind is completely in a state of deep sattva, and you're perceiving the sub.
Okay.
I would put this in a high.
Prasada has more to do with the reflection of the light on buddhi.
The reflection of the light in buddhi. The
clarity
clarity is
Bible.
sattva. All of these are states of sattva. Any talk of lucidity or clarity or luminosity are when we're in the sub-bija states, or states of mind. They're not states of the Atman. Okay, so nirvichara is I haven't looked at this for a while, but I wouldn't call this viveka. I want to go back and peek at my commentaries of how they're using the Vaisharada. It's clarity. The clarity. Adhyatma prasada. There is luminosity, lucidity of the inner self. Adhyatma. So could that, these words sometimes can be used in different ways.
Right.
Adhyatma can be used for the Atma, but it could also be used for a very, very subtle sattvic mind.
Right.
So we'd have to see what these kinds of verses, we need to see what the commentators say. I'd have to take a peek at that. It's been 13 years since I looked at it. But we can definitely, but I wouldn't call it Viveka though. I would call Viveka Jnana Yoga.
Okay.
A high level, not just a theoretical level, but a perception of Jnana Yoga in the world. Rosanna.
Thank you.
We'll take three more. We'll take two more questions. Subhash and then Mary Ellen. And though you're the only ones that have your hands up anyway.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Edwin. So thank you for this particular swadhyaya, because it is professionally very much correlated to what I'm doing. And I have a question that is a little bit, I'm reading this.
I can't see it. It's you have to move it up.
It's called Shiva Sanhita.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you're familiar with it. It is Tantrika, it is Shaiva, everything. But it also has a lot of lots of things that are in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And I was wondering what the connection is and which comes first.
Well, the Shiva Samhita, academic scholars anyway, would consider it a later text. A later text. And I think people in the Westerners have become at least it was brought to, it's not a well-known text at all, but it does mention asanas, and therefore it's kind of attention was drawn to it by Krishnamacharya and the great yoga asana teachers, because there's very few texts that speak of asana. There's the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which has 33 poses, but of course that was an obscure text nobody had ever heard of. But that gets plucked out of obscurity because it has asana. Of course, it has a lot of other weird stuff in it as well that gets ignored. And the other one is the Shiva Samhita and the Giranda Samhita. These are not pan-Indian. They're not sort of generic texts. They're very obscure texts, maybe known to certain, I don't know, Tantrika communities, perhaps. So, but your question is, consider yoga as a kind of a framework that different traditions then flavor with their own specifics and their own flavorings. So the basic, yamas, niyamas, the ashtangas, the kleshas, the vairagya, all of this stuff is generic. But then Tantrikas will add their own Kundalini model and the chakra model. They'll sort of blend that with the sort of basic infrastructure of yoga. Vaishnavas will really strengthen the Ishvara component. Jains have the 8 limbs, the Ashtanga. Buddhists have versions of it. So consider it kind of like the framework of all practice, really. Or many forms of, not all, but many, Shaiva, Vaishnava, Tantrika practices use the Ashtanga basic models, basic philosophy, and then they flavor it with their own particular whatever physiology or their particular goals.
Interesting enough, they call it Raja Yoga, and when you read it, it says this is the highest yoga and there is nothing higher than this. is it common to all
Yeah. Yeah,
different schools? Each one thinks that they are the top, the
Yeah, well,
highest?
actually, Patanjali doesn't say that, but it's quite common for that, yes. And the Gita talks about Raja Yoga and says it's the highest. So they're piggybacking on the Raja Yoga of the Gita. They're taking that name. But yeah, it's pretty common for that to happen. It's the highest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a second very
Yes.
practical question.
Yeah.
How am I going to download this from the website?
You go onto the link, the video link. It's right there on the web. You go to the video link. It may take 2 or 3 days, but you go to the video link and you just download it.
Oh, okay. So not this link, but there will be a video link.
You go into my website and not the Svadhyaya link. There's another one which says yoga videos. It's in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you,
All right.
Rosa.
Thank you
Okay. Let me take 2 more questions and then I think we're all getting tired. And Subhash.
Yeah, I just want to clarify this word chitta. You know, when we look at Sankhya, we said it talks about manas, buddhi, and ahankara, and each one of them has very specific functions. Manas does sankalpa and all that. So vrittis happen in the chitta, and there is no mention of the word chitta in Sankhya. Patanjali doesn't give any definition of chitta. Now, which of these 3, manas, buddhi, or ahankara, is where the vrittis are happening? So that has to be the chitta, right?
Yeah, and in other words, where Sankhya divides the mind in these 3 components, the manas, Patanjali does mention the word manas once, but yeah, he puts all 3 of them together in chitta, and it's a little bit confusing because Vedanta will have chitta as a 4th faculty. Vedanta will have manas, buddhi, ahankara, and then chitta as memory. So Patanjali is using it in a different way, and normally, so we could, would have been nice if he gave a definition, but he doesn't. But it's considered to be all 3 of them combined.
What does it mean, all 3 of them combined? I mean, things are happening very specifically. Like I said, Sankhya says they have very specific functions. Manas does sankalpakam, ahankara is something else, and buddhi does adhyavasaya and all that. So those are very specific functions.
Yes.
Within Sankhya system.
But that's what is of concern to Sankhya. Patanjali's concern is different. He's not so much interested in either the metaphysics of the world, right? Because Sankhya and Vaisheshika are going to be all about the metaphysics of the world. Well, Patanjali's not interested in that. And Sankhya talks about the components of the mind and the different activities of the, abhimana, the ego, but Patanjali's not interested in that. Each of these traditions have their different focuses. So Patanjali doesn't have to get into that because Sankhya has explained that to us. So he wants to say, okay, you've studied your Sankhya, you've done all of that. Now, what I'm doing, my contribution, Atta Yoga Anushasana, I just need to use the term chitta. That's all I need. Because what I'm going to teach you is you just nirodha your entire internal organ. So he's not interested in having a discussion on the psychology of he just gives us enough information, whatever information we need to make sense of his proposal that yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. I don't know why he doesn't define chitta. That's my speculation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. So Mary Ellen.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I have, logically, I could understand how the mind disappears in asamprajanata samadhi and there's no trace. But when you talk about, not just you, but whoever, about the samadhi with seed. Okay, so your translation says yoga is the stilling of the changing states of a mind. And I've got another translation here that says yoga is the nirodha of, and then in parenthesis, by ceasing to identify with vritti, the active state of chitta, the field. I don't see, the thing is, it seems to me that in the samadhi with seed states, okay, that there's got to be, maybe vritti is the wrong word, but I think of it as vritti being the turning, and if your mind becomes concentrated on just one thought, there's still a vritti, or maybe
Yeah,
at the,
no, there's a samskara. By the way, there's a lot of words, the second translation, that is not in Patanjali. It's got nothing to do with Patanjali, so be
well,
careful.
he's got,
Well, yeah, but then, you know, then you have to decide whether that's a legitimate thing to do, to insert words.
well, my
But
question
the
is,
question is, yes, in the sabija states, that's what bija means. There's an imprint in the mind. That's what a bija is. A bija is a samskara.
so you have to have something there in the mind.
Well,
It's
because the mind
different.
is fixed on an object of meditation. That
Right.
object is leaving a bija, but it's only one. There's no vritti. Vritti means when one samskara is replaced by another, by another, by another, and there's a flow of thought. But sab-bija, sab means with, and bija is just another word for samskara. So your object of meditation is leaving a samskara in the mind. It is, and that's why it's sabija samadhi. Nirbija means there's no seed. Why? Because consciousness is no longer absorbed in the mind. It's svarupa avastanam. It's absorbed in its own nature. So the sabija states are just deepening. The object is an experience of the deeper and deeper and deeper metaphysical nature of the object.
Okay, okay.
But but it's leaving a samskara for sure.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, we've got everyone's hand, and we.
So
let's-
one more thing, Edwin, somebody is saying in the comments that they tried to download from the website and they couldn't do it.
I don't know what to say. It's up there. Lesson number 1 is up there, just like in all previous svadhyayas, and you know, other people downloaded it, no problem. All I can say is try a different server, perhaps, or I don't know. That's, you know, I give it to my student. He puts it up for me. I'm not a techie guy, and everybody can download it. When I've had trouble in the past, I change a server, and that sometimes helps. But there's no password, and there's no problem. There should be no problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Devin, we will have a last question, just since you have your hand up. Devin?
I would just, yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't have a question. The link is just a streaming, so to download it, you have to kind of do some little back-end stuff. You can stream it live, but you can't download it from the website. I just wanted to make that clarification.
Oh, so they have to watch it on the site. Is that the same with my previous guys? All of them are like that?
No, there was a switch. I don't know. There was a new tool for the streaming now that switched over to this service where it's kind of just hosted on the server and you can't download. I did find a little workaround. If people want to ping me, I can email, and you give my email to them, and I can kind of give them a little tutorial.
Do you think, because I told the person that's putting them up, I said just keep them up for a week, but do you think he did that on purpose so that they couldn't be downloaded?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, some of your other ones, I think Nyaya was the same. You couldn't download them. You could stream them, and you can still stream them, but you can't download them to your computer. And since you were going to take them away, I think some people wanted to download them. So it's either a feature that can be turned off in the particular whatever Kaltura is hosting the saved stream videos. Anyways, it's not super technical, but slightly. Anyways, it may be a feature that can be turned on or off. I don't know, because I've never used that particular function.
Well, I mean, I don't mind if people download them and take them. That's never my intention to stop that. So this is beyond my technical, you know, knowledge base.
Edwin, that was Rutgers about 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, everything is Rutgers. This is all, and I'm on the Rutgers server, so that you know, that may be beyond my control. Yeah.
And that's fine. If people want to work around, I can. Well, I don't know.
But if you want to download them and you know how to download them, I don't mind. The only reason I was going to take the yoga ones down is because studios asked me to do lectures, and it didn't seem fair on them. But if they're up for a week and you can download them, by all means do. But then you'd have to figure out, maybe Devin will tell you how to do that.
Yeah, I did put it in the chat. Somebody asked if they want to look at it. I can't remember who asked the question, but I did do a little.
Okay.
Anyways.
Thank you, Devin. Yes. Yeah.
Edwin, do you think you could leave the classes up just for the length of the course?
Yeah, I'm not in a hurry to
And-
take them down. I'll leave them up for a month or 2 months. I don't really care. I mean,
If you could leave them for the duration of the course, because
yeah, of
some of us
course.
have to watch them 2-3
Yeah,
times.
yeah, nothing's been taken down. Yeah, I'll leave them up. I'll leave them up until the next time somebody asks for a workshop. Then I'll take them down. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, because studios have to make money too,
Yeah.
right? It's not easy to run a yoga studio. So they make money from in part, and one of the ways they make money is to have workshops on. So that's the only reason. Okay, my friends. And somebody was going to tell me how to get back a disappearing page.
Yes, just so bring up the Adobe viewer one more time, show it on screen, and we'll walk you through it.
So you mean go back to this?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think you had the tip given to you earlier. There are two tabs at the top.
Of this
Sorry,
doc.
should you stop recording?
Oh, yes, I should. Stop share. Okay, how do I stop recording? 1 second, sorry. Let's do this. And where's the record? Oh, it's up there. How do I stop recording? Oh, pause, stop.